Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Vegeta unlocked a new Saiyan form no one else could access? Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. And also check the description. So let's begin the story. The gravity chamber hummed with an intensity that would have crushed lesser beings into paste against the reinforced titanium floor. Inside the spherical training room, where the air itself seemed to shimmer and distort under the overwhelming pressure, a solitary figure moved with practiced precision. Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, threw another devastating punch into the empty air, the shockwave rippling outward and creating a thunderous boom that rattled the chamber's walls. Sweat poured down his face in rivulets, soaking through his training gear, a dark blue bodysuit that clung to his muscular frame. His widow's peak was plastered against his forehead, and his typically proud posture showed the slightest hint of strain. "Computer," he growled, his voice rough from exertion, "increase gravity to 1,000 times Earth normal." A mechanical voice responded with clinical detachment. "Warning. Current gravity setting is 950 times Earth normal. Increasing to 1,000 times exceeds recommended safety parameters. Structural integrity may be compromised. Do you wish to proceed?" I said increase it. Vegeta roared, his dark eyes flashing with barely contained fury. The chamber responded immediately. The already oppressive weight pressing down on every molecule of Vegeta's body increased further, and for just a moment, his knees buckled. His teeth ground together with such force that his jaw ached, but he refused to fall. Slowly, agonizingly, he straightened his back and stood tall once more. "I am the Prince of all Saiyans," he thought savagely, forcing his body to obey his iron will. "I will not bow. Not to gravity. Not to anyone." He began his forms again, combinations of strikes and energy manipulations that he had perfected over decades of relentless training. Each movement was precise, powerful, and executed with the kind of discipline that only a warrior prince could maintain. His fists blurred through the air, creating miniature sonic booms with every punch. His kicks were like thunderbolts, each one capable of splitting mountains. But it wasn't enough. It was never enough. As Vegeta trained, his mind wandered to places he desperately wished it wouldn't. Images flashed through his consciousness. Kakarot's idiotic grin as he achieved Ultra Instinct. The way the gods themselves looked impressed when that low-class clown accomplished what even deities struggled to master. The Tournament of Power, where once again, Goku had been the one to stand at the pinnacle while Vegeta fought in his shadow. "Damn him," Vegeta hissed, launching a devastating ki blast at the reinforced wall. The golden energy sphere exploded on impact, leaving a scorch mark but no lasting damage. Bulma had built this chamber to withstand even his strongest attacks. Damn him, and his endless luck. But was it luck? That was the question that gnawed at Vegeta's pride like a parasite burrowing into his very soul. Goku trained hard, yes, but so did Vegeta. Goku pushed his limits, but Vegeta pushed harder. Goku had determination, but Vegeta had pride. The pride of royalty, the fury of a prince who had lost everything and clawed his way back to relevance through sheer, uncompromising willpower. So why? Why was he always one step behind? Vegeta powered up, his aura exploding around him in a brilliant azure flame. The gravity chamber's lights flickered as his energy spiked, and the floor beneath his feet cracked despite its reinforced construction. He ascended into Super Saiyan Blue, his hair shifting from black to brilliant cyan, his eyes becoming teal pools of focused intensity. Even in this form, a transformation that combined the godly power of Super Saiyan God with the raw strength of Super Saiyan, he felt the weight pressing down on him. Not just the physical gravity, but something more. An invisible ceiling that he could sense but not break through. A limit that shouldn't exist for someone of his heritage and determination. More. He shouted at nothing and everything. "I need more." He launched into a complex kata, his movements accelerating until he became a blur of blue light and devastating power. Energy blasts peppered the chamber walls in rapid succession, each one exploding with the force of artillery shells. His muscles screamed in protest as the 1,000 times gravity tried to drag him down, but he pushed through the pain. Pain was temporary. Weakness was forever. No, he corrected himself mentally. Weakness is a choice. And I choose strength. The training continued for what might have been minutes or hours. Time lost meaning when one pushed themselves beyond mortal limitations. Vegeta's breathing became labored, his movements less precise. Even his godly stamina had limits, and he was rapidly approaching them. But still, he couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Because somewhere out there, Kakarot was probably training too. Probably smiling that idiotic smile while he discovered some new technique or transformation that would once again leave Vegeta in his dust. The thought was acid in Vegeta's mind, burning away rational thought and leaving only the raw, desperate need to surpass his eternal rival. Computer, he gasped, his voice hoarse, increased to 1100 times. Warning. That setting exceeds maximum safe parameters by 10%. Structural damage is probable. Recommend immediate. Do it! The gravity increased again, and this time Vegeta did fall. His knees hit the floor with a crack that might have been bone or metal. He couldn't tell anymore. His vision swam, dark spots dancing at the edges of his perception. His Super Saiyan blue form flickered, threatening to give out entirely. But even as his body betrayed him, even as every nerve ending screamed for mercy, Vegeta's mind remained defiant. Get up, he commanded himself. You are Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans. You are the heir to the mightiest warrior race in the universe. You are. The thought cut off as something strange happened. For just a moment, Vegeta's vision changed. The gray walls of the gravity chamber dissolved, replaced by a sky of deep purple streaked with red. He was no longer kneeling on cold metal but on red earth beneath an alien sun. Around him stood warriors, Saiyans, but different from any he had known. They were taller, more refined, wearing armor that gleamed with ceremonial significance rather than practical battle readiness. And in the center of this gathering stood a figure that made Vegeta's breath catch in his throat. The Saiyan was old, his face lined with age but his eyes burning with undiminished power. He wore a crown, an actual crown of black metal inlaid with crimson stones that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. His armor was ornate, marking him as royalty of the highest order. And his presence was overwhelming in a way that even Lord Beerus's aura wasn't. This was power, yes, but it was also authority, legacy, and pride distilled into a single being. You seek strength, the crowned Saiyan said, his voice echoing across the impossible distance between them. But you do not understand what strength truly is. Vegeta tried to speak, to demand answers, but his voice wouldn't work. He could only watch as the ancient king raised one hand, and a crimson aura, deep red like freshly spilled blood, erupted around him. It wasn't like Super Saiyan transformations Vegeta knew. There was no lightning, no screaming ascension. Just a calm, controlled manifestation of power that felt both alien and intimately familiar. We were not warriors alone, the king continued, his crimson aura pulsing in rhythm with some unheard heartbeat. We were royalty. We were legacy. We were pride made manifest. But you have forgotten what it means to be a true Prince of Saiyans. I haven't forgotten anything. Vegeta finally managed to shout, his voice cracking with emotion. I am the prince. I am. You are a shadow chasing light, the king interrupted, and there was sadness in his ancient eyes. You measure yourself against a low-class warrior and wonder why you cannot surpass him. You fight with rage instead of pride. You seek power to prove something to others instead of to yourself. The vision began to fade, the purple sky dissolving back into the gray walls of the gravity chamber. But the king's final words echoed in Vegeta's mind like a death knell. Until you understand the difference between a warrior and a prince, you will never access what is your birthright. The crimson crown awaits, but you are not yet worthy to claim it. Reality snapped back with jarring suddenness. Vegeta was still kneeling on the floor of the gravity chamber, his Super Saiyan blue form flickering weakly around him. But something was different. For just a moment, a fraction of a second that might have been imagination or exhaustion or something more, his aura had changed. Instead of the familiar blue, it had shifted to a deep, bloody crimson. Then it was gone, and Vegeta collapsed completely. The computer's emergency protocols activated immediately. The gravity dropped to normal Earth levels, and automated medical scanners began their work. Somewhere in the house, an alarm would be alerting Bulma that something had gone wrong in the training facility, but Vegeta barely noticed. As consciousness fled, His last thought was of that ancient king and those terrible, true words. Not yet worthy. Vegeta woke to the familiar ceiling of the medical bay adjacent to the gravity chamber. Soft lights glowed above him, and the gentle hum of monitoring equipment filled the air. His entire body ached with the deep, bone-level pain that came from pushing far beyond reasonable limits, even for a Saiyan. Finally awake, are we? Bulma's voice cut through his disorientation. She stood beside the medical bed, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of concern and exasperation that Vegeta had seen countless times over the years. Her blue hair was tied back in a practical ponytail, and she wore a white lab coat over her casual clothes. You've been out for 3 hours. 3 hours, Vegeta. Do you have any idea how worried I was? Vegeta sat up, ignoring the protests from his muscles. I'm fine, he growled, though his voice lacked its usual force. Fine? Bulma's voice rose. You collapsed in 1100 times gravity. The structural integrity of the chamber dropped to 70%. If you'd stayed in there much longer, the whole thing might have imploded with you inside. I said I'm fine. Vegeta snapped, but the anger felt hollow. His mind was still reeling from what he'd seen, or thought he'd seen. Had it been real? A vision brought on by oxygen deprivation and extreme physical stress? Or something more? Bulma's expression softened slightly. She sat on the edge of the medical bed, her hand finding his. Vegeta, I know you're always pushing yourself, and I admire your dedication. I really do, but this is getting extreme, even for you. What's driving you so hard lately? Vegeta pulled his hand away, not out of anger but out of an inability to articulate what was churning inside him. How could he explain to someone who had never been a warrior, never felt the crushing weight of always being second best? Bulma was brilliant, the smartest person on Earth, but she couldn't understand this. Kakarot achieved Ultra Instinct, he finally said, the words tasting like poison. A technique that even the gods struggled to master, and he stumbled into it through sheer dumb luck. Is that what this is about? Bulma asked, her voice gentle. Goku achieving something before you did? It's not about before or after. Vegeta stood abruptly, ignoring the way the room spun slightly. It's about. He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. About what? About pride? About legacy? About a low-class warrior surpassing a prince? All of it, and none of it. The words wouldn't come. Bulma stood as well, placing a hand on his arm. Listen to me, Vegeta. You are one of the strongest beings in all the universes. You've saved Earth more times than I can count. You're an incredible father, a loyal protector, and yes, a proud warrior. But you don't have to prove anything to anyone, not to Goku, not to the gods, not even to yourself. You don't understand, Vegeta said quietly, and for once there was no anger in his voice. Only weariness. I am the prince of all Saiyans. It's not just a title, Bulma. It's who I am. It's all I have left of my people, my heritage, my everything. If I can't be the strongest, if I can't surpass Kakarot, then what am I? Bulma's eyes widened slightly at the raw vulnerability in his words. Vegeta almost never opened up like this, never showed the depths of what drove him. Before she could respond, however, he turned and walked toward the door. I need to train, he said simply. Vegeta, wait. But he was already gone, leaving Bulma alone in the medical bay with a worried expression and a growing sense that something had fundamentally changed in her husband. The night air was cool against Vegeta's skin as he stood on the balcony outside his and Bulma's bedroom. Capsule Corporation sprawled below him, its dome-shaped buildings glowing softly in the darkness. Beyond that, West City stretched to the horizon, a sea of lights that represented millions of people going about their ordinary lives, blissfully unaware that their continued existence depended on warriors like him standing between them and universal threats. Vegeta's hands gripped the railing tightly enough to make the metal groan in protest. He had powered down from Super Saiyan Blue hours ago, but his body still hummed with residual energy. More than that, though, his mind raced with questions that had no easy answers. The vision, if that's what it had been, haunted him. The ancient Saiyan king, the crimson aura, the words about birthright and worthiness. What did it mean? And more importantly, why had it felt so real? Can't sleep either, huh? Vegeta turned to see Trunks emerging from the doorway that led into the house. His son had grown into a fine young man, tall, powerfully built, with lavender hair inherited from his mother, and the serious demeanor of a warrior. He wore simple training clothes, suggesting he'd been working out as well. "What are you doing up?" Vegeta asked, not unkindly. Trunks shrugged, coming to stand beside his father at the railing. "Heard the medical bay alarms earlier. Wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm fine," Vegeta said automatically, then caught himself. How many times had he said those words today? How many times had they been a lie? Father and son stood in silence for a moment, looking out over the city. Vegeta had never been good at these quiet, bonding moments. Words of affection or encouragement didn't come naturally to him. But standing here, with Trunks beside him, he felt something. Not quite peace, but perhaps its distant cousin. "Do you ever wonder about Planet Vegeta?" Trunks asked suddenly. "About what it was like? What our people were really like?" Vegeta glanced at his son, surprised by the question. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Why do you ask?" "I just..." Trunks hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. "I know I'm half human, and I'm proud of that. Mom's people have given me a lot. But I also have Saiyan blood. Your blood. Royal blood. And sometimes I wonder what that means, you know? If there's something I'm supposed to be or do because of it." Vegeta felt something tighten in his chest. He had spent so much time focused on his own struggles, his own need to prove himself, that he hadn't considered what legacy he was passing on to his son. What lessons was Trunks learning from watching his father train himself to the point of collapse, day after day, in a desperate attempt to surpass one rival? "Being Saiyan means being strong," Vegeta said finally, falling back on the simple truths he'd been taught as a child. "It means never giving up, never backing down, never accepting defeat." "Is that all it means?" Trunks asked, and there was something pointed in the question. "Just fighting and getting stronger?" Vegeta opened his mouth to respond with an automatic affirmative, but the words died in his throat. Was that all it meant? Was that all he had to pass on to his son, an endless cycle of training, fighting, and proving oneself? The image of the crowned Saiyan King flashed through his mind again. That being had radiated power, yes, but also something more. Dignity. Purpose. A sense of belonging to something greater than himself. "No," Vegeta said quietly, surprising himself. "No, it means more than that. It should mean more than that." Trunks looked at his father with curiosity, and perhaps a hint of hope. "Like what?" Vegeta struggled to find the words. "Our people, we were warriors, yes. But we were also a civilization. A culture. We had traditions, hierarchies, a way of life that was unique in all the universe, and all of that was destroyed when Frieza..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Even after all these years, the pain of losing his homeworld still cut deep. "You carry that legacy," Vegeta continued, his voice rough with emotion he rarely showed. "Not just the power, but everything our people were. The pride, the discipline, the refusal to ever truly surrender. That's what your Saiyan blood means, Trunks. That's what you should remember." Trunks nodded slowly, processing his father's words. "Then why do you train so hard, father? If it's about legacy and not just power, why push yourself like you do?" The question struck home with devastating accuracy. Why did he push so hard? Was it really about preserving Saiyan legacy, or was it just ego? Was it about honoring his people, or about his desperate need to prove he was better than Kakarot? Because... Vegeta started then stopped. He owed his son honesty, even if it was painful. "Because I'm afraid that if I'm not the strongest, I'm nothing. Because Kakarot took everything from me, my destiny, my purpose, my certainty about who I was supposed to be. Because I am a prince without a kingdom, a warrior without a people, and the only way I know how to prove I still matter is to be the best." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and vulnerable. Vegeta had never spoken these truths aloud before, had barely acknowledged them to himself. But here, in the darkness, with his son beside him, the words came unbidden. Trunks was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You know that's not true, right? That you're not nothing? You have us. Mom, me, brah. You have the Z-Fighters. You have Earth. You matter to all of us, father. regardless of whether you're the strongest or not. Vegeta felt something crack inside his chest. Not breaking, but perhaps opening. I know, he said quietly. Intellectually, I know that. But knowing something and feeling it are different things. Then maybe, Trunks suggested carefully, you need to find a different reason to train. Not to beat Goku, but for yourself. For your own growth. Vegeta turned to look at his son fully. When had Trunks become so wise? When had the boy who once traveled back in time to warn them about the androids become this thoughtful young man? Perhaps you're right, Vegeta admitted. Perhaps I've been fighting the wrong battle all along. They stood together in comfortable silence after that, father and son, watching the lights of West City twinkle below them. Vegeta felt exhausted, not just physically from his extreme training, but emotionally from the unexpected soul-searching this day had brought. Eventually, Trunks excused himself to get some sleep, clasping his father's shoulder briefly before heading inside. Vegeta remained on the balcony, his mind churning with thoughts of ancient kings, crimson auras, and the question that now burned in his mind: what did it truly mean to be the prince of all Saiyans? The next morning found Vegeta back in the gravity chamber, but something was different. The gravity was set to a reasonable 500 times Earth normal, intense, but well within his capabilities. He wasn't pushing himself to the point of destruction today. Instead, he moved through his forms with deliberate precision, focusing not on power but on technique, on perfection of movement. His conversation with Trunks the previous night had planted seeds of doubt, or perhaps clarity, in his mind. All his life, Vegeta had defined himself by being the strongest, by being superior. But what if that definition was inherently flawed? What if true strength came from something else? The vision of the crowned Saiyan king haunted him. You fight with rage instead of pride, the ancient ruler had said. What did that mean? Vegeta had always thought his pride and his rage were the same thing, fuel for the fire that drove him to greater heights. But perhaps they weren't. Perhaps pride was something calmer, more centered. A quiet certainty in one's own worth that didn't need constant validation through victory. Vegeta threw a punch, then froze mid-motion. His reflection stared back at him from the chamber's polished walls, a Saiyan warrior in his prime, powerful and battle-hardened. But also, tired. Endlessly tired from a race he could never seem to win. Computer, he said slowly, an idea forming, access historical database. Search for, ancient Saiyan royalty, planet Vegeta historical records, Saiyan cultural practices. The computer beeped in acknowledgement, and a holographic display materialized before him. Text and images scrolled past, what little information remained about his destroyed homeworld. Most of it was fragmentary, pieces of a puzzle with most of the parts missing. The Saiyans hadn't been great record keepers, more concerned with conquest than documentation, but there were some things. References to the royal bloodline stretching back generations. Mentions of ceremonies and traditions that marked the ascension of new kings. And buried in one obscure file, a single phrase that made Vegeta's breath catch. The Crimson Crown, a legendary state of being said to manifest only in true-born princes of royal blood during times of great spiritual need. No confirmed instances exist in modern records. Vegeta read the passage 3 times, his heart pounding. The Crimson Crown. That was what the ancient king had mentioned in his vision, but if no confirmed instances existed, how could Vegeta have known about it? He'd never seen this file before, had never heard the term until the vision. Unless it hadn't been oxygen deprivation or hallucination. Unless it had been something real. Some kind of genetic memory, a connection to his ancestors calling out across time and death. Show me everything related to the Crimson Crown, Vegeta commanded. There are no additional files matching that designation, the computer replied. Of course not. The Saiyans were extinct, their knowledge lost. Vegeta was probably the only person in the entire universe who even knew the term existed, but he knew it now. And somehow, impossibly, he understood that this was what he'd been searching for all along. Not another transformation to match Kakarot's, not just more raw power, but something uniquely his, a manifestation of his royal heritage that no low-class warrior could ever access. The question was, how did he achieve it? The vision's words echoed in his mind. Until you understand the difference between a warrior and a prince, you will never access what is your birthright. Vegeta powered down completely, his aura fading away to nothing. He sat cross-legged on the chamber floor, an unusual position for him. Meditation had never been his strong suit. He preferred action, movement, the physical expression of power. But perhaps that was part of the problem. A warrior fights, he thought. But what does a prince do? A prince ruled. A prince led. A prince carried the weight of his people's legacy and future on his shoulders. A prince didn't just fight for himself, but for something greater. And Vegeta? Vegeta had no people left to rule. No kingdom to lead. He was a prince in name only, clinging to a title that meant nothing in practical terms. No wonder he felt so lost. He'd been trying to prove his worth through battle because he had no other way to express his princely nature. But perhaps that had been the wrong approach all along. Computer, resume normal gravity, Vegeta said, standing. And prepare a training simulation. Level, extreme. The chamber complied, and holographic opponents materialized around him. Digital constructs modeled after various enemies he'd faced over the years. Cell, the androids, various alien warriors. They moved with deadly intent, programmed to push him to his limits. But this time, Vegeta didn't just fight. He thought. He analyzed. He approached each opponent not with rage or frustration, but with the cool calculation of a general commanding troops. He identified weaknesses, exploited openings, conserved energy. He fought not like a warrior in a brawl, but like a prince in a war, and something shifted. It was subtle at first, just a slight change in how his ki flowed through his body. But as the training continued, as Vegeta maintained that calm, controlled mindset, the sensation grew stronger. His aura flickered, and for just a moment, a hint of crimson bled through the blue. Vegeta's eyes widened. He was onto something. This was the path. But before he could pursue it further, the training simulation ended. The holographic opponents faded, and Vegeta was left alone in the chamber, breathing hard but feeling more focused than he had in months. Interesting, came a calm voice from the chamber's entrance. Vegeta spun to see Whis standing there, his staff glowing softly, his expression as placid as ever. The angel had apparently let himself in, as was his habit. "What do you want?" Vegeta demanded, though there was less hostility in his tone than usual. He'd learned to respect Whis over the years, even if the angel's constant calm sometimes grated on his nerves. "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd check on your progress," Whis said mildly, floating into the chamber. "Lord Beerus is napping, so I have some free time, and I must say, I sensed something quite unusual from your training just now." "Unusual how?" Vegeta asked, trying to sound casual and failing completely. Whis tilted his head, studying Vegeta with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Your ki changed for a moment. Shifted into a frequency I've never quite felt before. Not Ultra Instinct, not Super Saiyan Blue Evolution, but something different. Something older, perhaps?" Vegeta's jaw tightened. Of course Whis had noticed. Angels miss nothing. "I don't know what you're talking about," Vegeta said, but the lie was transparent even to him. "Oh, don't you?" Whis smiled knowingly. "Come now, Vegeta. We've been training together for years. I can tell when you're on the verge of something significant. This feels resonant, as if you're tapping into something fundamental to your very nature." Vegeta hesitated, torn between his instinct for secrecy and his need for guidance. Finally, grudgingly, he said, "I had a vision. During training yesterday, an ancient Saiyan king who spoke of something called the Crimson Crown." Whis' expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or at least interest. "The Crimson Crown," he repeated thoughtfully. "Now that is a name I haven't heard in quite some time. You know of it?" Vegeta demanded, stepping forward eagerly. "In passing," Whis admitted. "The Saiyans were an ancient race, Vegeta, and while they focused primarily on physical power, they did develop some rather unique spiritual practices. The Crimson Crown was said to be a state of being accessible only to those of royal bloodline, a manifestation of not just power, but of legacy, authority, and, how shall I put it, princely essence." "How do I achieve it?" Vegeta asked immediately. Whis chuckled. "Always so direct. I'm afraid I can't tell you that, even if I wanted to. This isn't something that can be taught, Vegeta. It's something that must be discovered, something that requires you to truly understand what it means to be not just a Saiyan warrior, but a Saiyan prince. Vegeta growled in frustration. More riddles. Everyone speaks in riddles, because some truths can't be stated plainly, Whis replied, his tone gentle but firm. You're searching for external validation, Vegeta. You want someone to tell you how to surpass Goku, how to prove your worth, how to claim your birthright. But the answer isn't external. It's internal. It always has been. Then what good are you? Vegeta snapped. Instead of being offended, Whis merely smiled. I'm here to observe, to guide when appropriate, and to ensure you don't destroy yourself in the process of growth. Speaking of which, your training yesterday was rather reckless, don't you think? 1100 times gravity? Even for a Saiyan, that's excessive. I needed to push my limits, Vegeta muttered. No, Whis corrected. You needed to prove something to yourself. There's a difference. True growth doesn't come from desperation, Vegeta. It comes from understanding. Vegeta wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the angel's calm wisdom, but he couldn't. Because deep down, he knew Whis was right. Everything he'd been doing lately, the extreme training, the endless pushing, the desperate need to surpass Kakarot, it all came from a place of fear and insecurity, not strength. What should I do? Vegeta asked quietly, and the question cost him considerable pride. Whatever feels right, Whis replied unhelpfully. But perhaps start by asking yourself, what does being a prince mean to you? Not what it meant to your father, not what it means in Saiyan tradition, but what it means to you, here and now, in this time and place. With that cryptic advice delivered, Whis turned and floated toward the exit. I'll let Lord Beerus know you're doing well. Do try not to destroy your training facility again, won't you? It's such a bother when Bulma has to rebuild it. And then he was gone, leaving Vegeta alone with his thoughts and a question that had no easy answer. What does being a prince mean to me? As the sun set over West City, Vegeta remained in the gravity chamber, not training, but thinking. For perhaps the first time in years, he wasn't focused on power levels or transformations or surpassing his rival. Instead, he was focused on something far more difficult and far more important, understanding himself. And in the depths of his consciousness, like a dormant seed waiting for the right conditions to sprout, something crimson stirred. Sleep eluded Vegeta that night. He lay in the darkness of the bedroom he shared with Bulma, staring at the ceiling as moonlight filtered through the curtains and painted silver patterns across the walls. Beside him, Bulma breathed softly in peaceful slumber, one arm draped across his chest in an unconscious gesture of affection that he would never have tolerated in his younger years. Now, though, he found it comforting. A reminder that he had more in his life than just battle and pride. But comfort wasn't what his mind craved tonight. His thoughts churned endlessly, circling back again and again to the vision of the ancient Saiyan king, to Whis' cryptic words, to that strange crimson aura he'd felt flickering at the edges of his consciousness. What does being a prince mean to me? The question haunted him. In his youth, being a prince had meant everything. It was his identity, his purpose, his justification for existence. He was Vegeta, prince of all Saiyans, destined to be the strongest warrior in the universe. His bloodline guaranteed it. His heritage demanded it. Then Frieza had destroyed planet Vegeta, and suddenly Prince of all Saiyans had become a hollow title. Prince of what? A dead race? A destroyed world? Scattered survivors who barely remembered their own culture? Vegeta had spent decades trying to reclaim meaning through power alone. If he couldn't rule a kingdom, he could at least prove that royal blood bred superior strength. But even that had been taken from him, stolen by a low-class warrior who should have been beneath his notice. Kakarot, Vegeta thought, and for once the name didn't come with a surge of rage. Just weariness. Why can't I surpass you? As if in answer to his unspoken question, the room changed. It happened so gradually that Vegeta almost didn't notice at first. The moonlight streaming through the curtains began to shift, taking on a purple hue. The walls seemed to ripple and distort, like reflections in disturbed water. And the temperature, already comfortable, became warmer, drier, carrying scents that Vegeta hadn't smelled in over 3 decades. Sulfur. Ozone. The distinctive metallic tang of a world with 3 times Earth's gravity. Vegeta sat up slowly, careful not to wake Bulma. His warrior instinct screamed at him that something was wrong, but he felt no malice, no threat. Just presence. An overwhelming sense of being watched by something ancient and vast. The bedroom dissolved completely, and Vegeta found himself standing on red earth beneath a purple sky. Planet Vegeta. Or rather, a memory of it, a ghost of his destroyed homeworld conjured from somewhere deep in his genetic memory. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, rocky wastelands dotted with hardy vegetation, distant mountains that scraped the sky, and overhead, 3 suns that cast overlapping shadows across everything. This is impossible, Vegeta breathed, but he made no move to wake himself. Some instinct told him this was important, that he needed to see whatever was about to unfold. Figures began to materialize around him, Saiyans, dozens of them, arranged in formal ranks. They wore armor unlike anything Vegeta had seen in his lifetime. Ceremonial plates of black metal etched with crimson patterns, capes that billowed despite the still air, and expressions of disciplined attention that spoke to military precision rather than battle-hungry savagery. These were not the brutal conquerors that Saiyans had become under Frieza's rule. These were something older, something that predated the corruption of his race. At the center of the gathering stood the crowned king from Vegeta's previous vision. But he was younger now, his face unmarred by age, his posture radiating the confident power of a ruler in his prime. The black crown with crimson stones sat upon his head like it had grown there, a natural extension of his being. Witness, a voice said, not the king's, but something else, something that seemed to come from the planet itself. Witness what your people once were, before pride became arrogance, before strength became cruelty. The scene shifted, and Vegeta found himself watching as the crowned king moved through his duties. Not fighting, though his power was evident in every movement, but leading. He adjudicated disputes between warriors, his judgments swift and fair. He reviewed battle strategies with his generals, his tactical mind evident in how he analyzed scenarios. He walked among his people, and though they bowed in respect, there was no fear in their eyes. Only loyalty and trust. This is King Vegeta III, the voice continued. Your ancestor, 15 generations removed. He ruled during what historians would later call the Golden Age of the Saiyan race. Before the civil wars, before Frieza, before the fall. Vegeta watched, transfixed, as his ancient ancestor demonstrated what it truly meant to be a Saiyan king. The strength was there, yes. In one scene, King Vegeta III personally led a defense against massive beasts that threatened a Saiyan settlement, his power overwhelming the creatures with ease. But the strength was wielded with purpose, with control, with a clear understanding that power existed to serve the people, not the other way around. He understood, the voice said, what you have forgotten. A prince is not defined by being the strongest. A prince is defined by responsibility, by legacy, by the weight of all those who came before and all those who will come after. The scene shifted again. Now King Vegeta III stood alone on a mountaintop, his aura blazing around him. But it wasn't the familiar golden glow of Super Saiyan. It was crimson, deep and rich like arterial blood, pulsing with controlled power that made the very air shimmer. The crimson crown, the voice intoned. A manifestation of royal essence, accessible only to those of true royal blood who understand what their title truly means. It is not a transformation gained through rage or desperation. It is an awakening, a recognition of what you are and what you represent. Vegeta stepped forward unconsciously, drawn to the display of power before him. How? He demanded. How did he achieve it? King Vegeta III turned, and for the first time, his eyes met those of his distant descendant. When he spoke, his voice was the same one from Vegeta's first vision, deep, authoritative, laden with centuries of wisdom. I achieved it, the ancient king said, when I stopped fighting to prove I was worthy of the crown and started accepting that I already was. When I understood that my strength existed not for my own glory, but for my people. When I recognized that being the strongest was meaningless if I had no one to protect with that strength. I have people to protect, Vegeta protested. I've saved Earth countless times. I fight to protect my family, You fight to prove you're better than Kakarot, King Vegeta III interrupted, and his tone was not unkind but neither was it gentle. Be honest with yourself, descendant. Every battle, every training session, every moment of frustration, It all comes back to that low-class warrior who has somehow surpassed you. You protect Earth, yes, but you do it while constantly measuring yourself against him. The words struck home with devastating accuracy. Vegeta wanted to argue, to rage against the accusation, but he couldn't. Because it was true. Every choice he made, every goal he set, it all existed in relation to Goku. Even his moments of genuine heroism were tainted by that endless comparison. Vegeta struggled to form words. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to define myself without that rivalry. King Vegeta 3's expression softened slightly. Then that is what you must learn. The Crimson Crown cannot be claimed by one who defines himself through opposition to another. It requires you to know yourself completely, your strengths and weaknesses, your purpose and meaning, independent of any external measure. The ancient king raised his hand, and the crimson aura intensified around him. This power comes from accepting your heritage fully, not the heritage of destruction that the Saiyans became, but the heritage of leadership, of responsibility, of carrying the weight of a civilization on your shoulders even when that civilization exists only in memory. But my people are dead, Vegeta said, and the pain in his voice was raw. There's nothing left to carry. No civilization to lead. I'm a prince of nothing. Are you? King Vegeta 3 challenged. You have a son who carries your blood. You have a daughter who bears your name. You have a world full of people who look to you as a protector. You have warriors who fight beside you and trust in your strength. How is that nothing? Vegeta opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. He had never thought of it that way, had never considered that his family, the Z-Fighters, even the people of Earth might constitute a form of kingdom, not in the traditional sense, but in terms of responsibility and legacy. The Saiyan race as you knew it is gone, King Vegeta 3 continued. But the essence of what we were, the pride, the strength, the unbreakable will, that lives on in you, and more importantly, you have the opportunity to redefine what it means to be a Saiyan prince for a new age. Not a conqueror or destroyer, but a protector. A leader. A legacy keeper. The scene began to fade, the red earth and purple sky dissolving back into darkness. But before it disappeared completely, King Vegeta 3 spoke one final time. The path to the Crimson Crown lies not in power, but in understanding. Not in rage, but in acceptance. Not in proving your worth to others, but in recognizing your own value. When you can stand before the universe and say I am Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans without needing to prove what that means through combat, then, and only then, will the Crimson Awakening come. Reality snapped back like a rubber band released. Vegeta found himself sitting up in bed, breathing hard, sweat dampening his hair despite the cool temperature of the room. Bulma stirred beside him, her eyes opening slowly. Vegeta? She murmured sleepily. What's wrong? Another nightmare? No, Vegeta said quietly, his mind still reeling from what he'd witnessed. Not a nightmare. Something else. Bulma sat up, instantly more alert. Years of living with the Saiyan warrior had taught her to recognize when something significant was happening. What kind of something else? Vegeta hesitated, then made a decision. If he was going to move forward, if he was going to understand what these visions meant, he needed to stop carrying everything alone. I've been having visions, he admitted. Of ancient Saiyans. Of my ancestors. They're teaching me something. Or trying to. Bulma's expression shifted from concern to fascination. Visions? Like actual psychic visions? Or metaphorical ones? I don't know, Vegeta confessed. They feel real. More real than dreams. But they could be some kind of genetic memory, or... He trailed off, uncertain how to explain. Bulma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, you know, the Saiyan biology has always been fascinating from a scientific perspective. Your people were warriors, yes, but you also had incredibly advanced genetic traits. It's not impossible that some kind of ancestral memory could be encoded in your DNA, especially if you're under extreme stress or pursuing a specific goal. You think that's what this is? Vegeta asked. Genetic memory? Maybe, Bulma said thoughtfully. Or maybe it's something more. The universe is full of things science can't fully explain yet. Ki energy, for instance, or how transformations work on a cellular level. If your ancestors achieve some kind of unique state, This crimson crown you mentioned, maybe the knowledge of how to access it is literally in your blood. The idea resonated with something deep in Vegeta's consciousness. That would explain why only those of royal blood could achieve it, he mused. It's not just about power or training, it's about genetic legacy, but also about mindset, Bulma added, her scientific mind working through the problem. From what you've described, these visions aren't just showing you techniques, they're challenging your understanding of who you are. That's psychological, not just genetic. Vegeta nodded slowly. She was right, of course. The visions weren't giving him a training manual, or a step-by-step guide. They were forcing him to confront fundamental questions about his identity and purpose. I need to understand more, he said, making a decision. About my people, my ancestors, the Saiyan culture before Frieza corrupted it. Everything I know comes from my father's teachings, and Vegeta paused, choosing his words carefully. He was a product of an already fallen age. He taught me to be strong, to be ruthless, to conquer. But these visions are showing me something different, something older and perhaps truer. Bulma squeezed his hand. Then tomorrow, we research. I have databases full of information from across the galaxy. If there's anything about ancient Saiyan culture out there, we'll find it. And maybe understanding your heritage will help you understand yourself. Vegeta felt a wave of gratitude for his wife. Brilliant, supportive, and willing to help him navigate these strange waters without judgment. Thank you, he said simply. That's what family does, Bulma replied, settling back down beside him. Now try to get some sleep. We'll tackle this in the morning. But sleep didn't come easily. Vegeta lay awake for hours more, replaying the vision in his mind, analyzing every word King Vegeta III had spoken. And somewhere in the darkness, he felt it. That crimson presence, patient and waiting, like a door he couldn't quite figure how to open. Morning came with typical West City brightness, the sun rising over gleaming buildings, traffic beginning its daily flow, the city awakening to another ordinary day. But in Capsule Corporation, specifically in Bulma's main laboratory, nothing about the day felt ordinary. Vegeta stood before a massive holographic display that dominated one wall of the lab, currently showing fragmented data files about Saiyan history. Bulma worked at her main computer terminal, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she compiled information from dozens of sources. Okay, she said, not looking up from her work. I've pulled everything we have on Saiyan culture from the Galactic Database, Whis' historical archives that he shared with me, and even some recovered data fragments from old Frieza Force servers. It's not much, your people weren't big on record keeping, but there are some interesting patterns. The holographic display shifted, showing images and text compiled from various sources. Vegeta leaned forward, his eyes scanning the information hungrily. Pre-conquest Saiyan society was highly stratified, Bulma narrated, highlighting relevant sections. You had the royal family at the top, followed by elite warrior clans, then common warriors, and finally the labor class. But here's what's interesting. The royal family's authority didn't come just from being the strongest. According to these records, they were considered spiritual as well as military leaders. Spiritual? Vegeta frowned. That didn't match his understanding of Saiyan culture at all. Saiyans weren't spiritual. We were warriors. The Saiyans you knew weren't spiritual, Bulma corrected. But go back far enough, and there are references to something called the blood resonance, a mystical connection between royalty and the planet itself. Kings weren't just political leaders. They were seen as living conduits between the Saiyan people and planet Vegeta. The hologram displayed in ancient text, the Saiyan characters harsh and angular. Bulma had provided a translation below. The king's blood sings with the planet's heart. In times of great need, when the people cry out for guidance, the blood resonance awakens. The king becomes more than flesh, becomes the living embodiment of Saiyan will and pride. This is the Crimson Crown, and it marks a true sovereign. Vegeta read the passage 3 times, his hearts, yes, Saiyans had too, beating faster with each repetition. This is it, he breathed. This is what I've been seeing. There's more, Bulma said, pulling up another file. I found references to a ceremony called the Trial of Sovereignty. It wasn't something every prince went through, only those who were being prepared for kingship. The records are fragmentary, but from what I can piece together, It involved some kind of vision quest where the prince would commune with the spirits of his ancestors. Vision quest, Vegeta repeated. That matches what's been happening to me, which means, Bulma said, turning to face him fully, that whatever's triggering these visions, it's not random. Some part of your Saiyan genetics is activating, possibly in response to your current psychological state. You've been pushing yourself so hard, questioning your purpose so deeply, that you've inadvertently triggered some kind of ancestral right. The implications were staggering. Vegeta had spent his entire life believing that Saiyan power came purely from physical strength and battle experience. But what if there was another dimension to it? What if Royal Saiyans had access to powers that worked on a completely different principle? Can you find anything about how to complete this trial of sovereignty? Vegeta asked. Bulma shook her head apologetically. The records just aren't complete enough. Most of this culture was lost when planet Vegeta was destroyed. I'm honestly amazed we found this much. She paused, then added, but maybe that's the point. Maybe this isn't something that can be learned from records. Maybe you have to discover it yourself, guided by these visions. Vegeta clenched his fists in frustration. He wanted clear answers, a training regimen to follow, concrete steps to take. This nebulous journey of self-discovery went against every instinct he'd developed as a warrior. There is one more thing, Bulma said carefully. I found a reference to the last known case of someone achieving the Crimson Crown. It was over 200 years before planet Vegeta's destruction, during the reign of King Vegeta VIII. According to the records, he accessed the transformation during a civil war that threatened to tear the Saiyan race apart. What happened? Vegeta demanded. He ended the war in a single day, Bulma read from the file. Appeared on the battlefield wreathed in crimson power, and his presence alone was enough to make both sides lay down their arms. The records describe it as the king's authority made manifest, a power so overwhelming and so clearly legitimate that opposition became impossible. Vegeta's mind raced. A power based not on raw strength but on authority, on legitimacy, on the weight of royal heritage itself. It was unlike anything he'd encountered before, but it resonated with something deep in his consciousness. I need to train, he said abruptly. But differently than before. Not pushing my body to destruction, but trying to connect with whatever this is. Meditation? Bulma suggested. I know it's not your style, but if these visions come when you're in an altered state of consciousness, I'll try anything, Vegeta said, and meant it. The desperation he'd felt before had transformed into something else, not desperate hunger for power, but genuine curiosity and a strange sense of rightness, as if he'd finally found a path that was truly his own. The gravity chamber became Vegeta's sanctuary over the following days. But the training that occurred within it would have been unrecognizable to anyone who knew his previous methods. Instead of punishing physical routines, Vegeta sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, breathing regulated. The gravity was set to a moderate 200 times Earth normal, enough to require focus to maintain his position, but not so extreme as to be distracting. He was attempting to meditate, and failing spectacularly. This is pointless, he growled, opening his eyes for the 100th time. His mind refused to quiet, constantly jumping from thought to thought, analyzing, strategizing, comparing. The silence felt oppressive rather than peaceful. But each time frustration threatened to overwhelm him, he remembered King Vegeta III's words. The path to the Crimson Crown lies not in power, but in understanding. Understanding required clarity. Clarity required a calm mind. And a calm mind required practice. So Vegeta closed his eyes again and tried once more. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky, then began its descent. And slowly, painfully, Vegeta began to find a rhythm. Not peace. Peace might never come to a warrior's soul, but a kind of controlled stillness. A state where thoughts could flow without being immediately acted upon, observed rather than obeyed. In this state, memories surfaced unbidden. He saw himself as a child on planet Vegeta, training under his father's harsh instruction. King Vegeta IV had been a hard man, shaped by decades of servitude to Frieza. His pride twisted into something bitter and desperate. Every lesson had been about strength, about domination, about proving Saiyan's superiority. You are a prince, his father's voice echoed across the years. That means you must be stronger than everyone else. Weakness is not tolerated in the royal bloodline. But the visions had shown him a different kind of kingship, one where strength served a purpose beyond itself. Where being a prince meant carrying responsibility, not just wielding power. Which vision was true? Or were they both true, representing different eras of Saiyan culture, one noble, one corrupted? The meditation deepened, and more memories came. His years serving Frisia, killing on command, conquering planets for a tyrant who had murdered his people. The shame of that servitude still burned, even after all these years. He had been a prince playing at being a conqueror, never acknowledging that he was really just a slave. Then his arrival on Earth. Meeting Kakarot, no Goku. The name still felt foreign in his mind, but he was trying. Meeting Goku and having everything he believed about himself shattered. A low-class warrior proving stronger, purer of purpose, more naturally heroic than a prince could ever be. And the long, painful journey since then. Slow redemption measured in battles fought for others rather than himself. A family he never expected and didn't always know how to deserve. Friends, he still struggled with that word, who trusted him despite his past. You have a world full of people who look to you as a protector, King Vegeta 3 had said. How is that nothing? It wasn't nothing. Vegeta had been so focused on what he'd lost, his planet, his people, his destiny as the universe's strongest, that he'd failed to see what he'd gained. A second chance. A new purpose. A different kind of legacy to build. The realization didn't come as a thunderbolt of enlightenment. It was quieter than that, more subtle. Just a gradual shift in perspective, like turning a kaleidoscope and seeing the same pieces form a different pattern. Vegeta opened his eyes slowly. The gravity chamber looked the same, but he felt different. Not transformed. The crimson crown hadn't appeared, and he hadn't expected it to. But something had shifted internally, some small step taken on a path he was only beginning to understand. Progress, he murmured to himself, and for once the word didn't taste like failure. That evening, Vegeta found himself in the Capsule Corporation kitchen, watching Bulma prepare dinner with Bra helping enthusiastically. His daughter, still so young, full of energy and completely unaware of the legacy she carried, chattered happily about her day at school while Bulma chopped vegetables. And then Trunks said I could come watch him train if I promised not to distract him. Bra announced proudly, her blue hair bouncing as she gesticulated. Can I, Daddy? Can I watch training? Vegeta felt his usual instinct to refuse. Training was serious business, not entertainment for children, but paused. Why did he want to refuse? To protect her from the harsh realities of combat? Or because he'd been taught that weakness should be hidden, that only strength deserved to be displayed? If your brother agrees, he heard himself say, and if you can sit quietly without interrupting, then yes. You may watch. Bra's face lit up like one of Earth's suns, and she launched herself at Vegeta with a hug that he accepted somewhat awkwardly. Physical affection still didn't come naturally to him, but he was learning. Best daddy ever, Bra declared, then ran off to presumably call Trunks and share the news. Bulma looked at him with surprise and approval. That was very evolved of you. Don't make a big deal out of it, Vegeta grumbled, but there was no real heat in his words. I'm serious, Bulma said, setting down her knife and coming over to him. You've been different these past few days. Calmer, maybe? More present. It's nice. Vegeta considered her words. Was he calmer? He still felt the constant drive to improve, the need to grow stronger. But the desperate, frantic edge had dulled somewhat. The visions and meditation hadn't given him peace, exactly, but they'd given him something else, perspective, perhaps. A sense that he was moving towards something rather than running from something. The visions continue, he admitted quietly. Not every time I meditate, but often enough. Each one shows me something different about what it meant to be a Saiyan king. About responsibility and legacy. And it's helping? Bulma asked. I don't know yet, Vegeta answered honestly. But it feels right. Like I'm finally pursuing something that's truly mine, not just trying to match someone else's achievements. Bulma smiled and kissed his cheek. That sounds like progress to me. The moment was interrupted by an energy signature appearing outside. A familiar one that made Vegeta's muscles tense reflexively. Kakarot, he said, sensing Goku's approach. Probably wants to spar, Bulma sighed. That man has the worst timing. but Vegeta was already heading toward the door. He did want to spar, needed to, actually, not to prove anything or measure himself against Goku, but because fighting was still the language he spoke most fluently. And right now, he wanted to test something. Goku stood in the Capsule Corp courtyard, his hands on his hips, grinning that carefree grin that had once infuriated Vegeta beyond measure. It still annoyed him, but the white-hot rage had cooled to something more manageable. Vegeta! Hope I'm not interrupting anything, but I was in the neighborhood and thought maybe we could spar, Vegeta finished, floating down to ground level. I know. You have the subtlety of a meteor strike, Kakarot. It's Goku, the younger Saiyan corrected automatically, but with good humor. And yeah, I've been working on a new technique. Wanted to see how it works against someone really strong. There it was, the casual acknowledgement of Vegeta's strength, delivered without any sense of competition or one-upmanship. Just Goku's honest assessment that Vegeta was really strong, and therefore a good training partner. It was almost insulting in its lack of rivalry. Almost. Fine, Vegeta said, dropping into a fighting stance. But we keep it at base form to start. No transformations unless necessary. Goku's expression showed surprise but also interest. Really? That's unusual for you. But sure, sounds fun. Of course, he agreed immediately. Goku would probably have agreed to fight with one arm tied behind his back if Vegeta had suggested it. The man had no ego about these things, which was simultaneously admirable and infuriating. They began. The first exchanges were familiar, rapid-fire punches and kicks, each warrior reading the other's movements with the precision that came from years of combat together. But Vegeta noticed something as they fought. Usually, his mind would be racing, analyzing every move, comparing his performance to Goku's, looking for any sign that he was falling behind. Now, though, his mind was quieter. He fought with the same intensity, the same skill, but without the constant internal commentary of inadequacy. He was just fighting, enjoying the pure physical challenge of matching himself against a worthy opponent. You seem different today, Goku called out between exchanges, his expression curious rather than concerned. More focused, maybe? Shut up and fight, Vegeta responded, but there was almost a hint of humor in his tone. The spar intensified, both warriors pushing their base forms to the limit. And then, in the midst of a complex combination of strikes, something unexpected happened. Vegeta felt it, a surge of energy that didn't come from his muscles or his ki, but from somewhere deeper. A resonance that connected to that crimson presence he'd been sensing in his meditations. For just a fraction of a second, his aura flickered, a hint of red bleeding through his normal white energy. Goku noticed immediately, his eyes widening. Whoa! What was that? But it was already gone, and Vegeta had no words to explain it. He pulled back from the spar, his hand rising to his chest as if he could feel the source of that strange power through his skin. Vegeta? Goku's concern was genuine, his competitive nature completely set aside. You okay? Should we stop? I'm fine, Vegeta said, but his mind was racing. That surge had felt similar to the visions but more tangible, more present. As if whatever power he was seeking had briefly acknowledged him. That was some kind of new technique, right? Goku asked, his excitement returning. It felt really different from your normal energy. Is it like Ultra Instinct, or more like when you evolved Blue, or... It's nothing, Vegeta interrupted, not wanting to explain something he didn't understand himself. Just experimenting with energy control. But Goku's expression suggested he didn't entirely believe that. His combat instincts were too sharp to miss the significance of what had happened. Well, if you figure it out, let me know. I'd love to see what you're working on. We could train together, maybe I could help. No, Vegeta said sharply, then forced himself to moderate his tone. This is something I need to explore on my own, Kakarot. It's personal. To Vegeta's surprise, Goku simply nodded in understanding. Sure, I get it. Sometimes you gotta work through stuff yourself. But if you want a sparring partner to test things on, I'm always available. And just like that, Goku was off, waving cheerfully as he used instant transmission to vanish back to wherever he'd come from, leaving Vegeta standing alone in the courtyard, his hands still pressed to his chest, feeling the echo of that crimson resonance. It had been brief, barely a heartbeat's worth of time. But it had been real, and more importantly it had come not from rage or desperation, but from a moment of pure focus, when Vegeta had been fighting not to prove anything, but simply because he was a warrior and fighting was what warriors did. Progress, he murmured again, and this time the word tasted like hope. That night the visions returned with greater intensity than ever before. Vegeta found himself walking through the halls of a massive palace, the royal palace of planet Vegeta, though this version was more magnificent than anything he remembered from his childhood. The walls were carved from black stone shot through with veins of crimson crystal that glowed with internal light. Banners bearing the royal crest hung from the ceiling, and everywhere he looked, there were signs of a civilization at its peak. Warriors trained in courtyards visible through tall windows, but their training had structure and discipline rather than wild savagery. Scholars worked in libraries, documenting history and culture. Artisans created weapons and armor that were as beautiful as they were functional. This was the Saiyan race before the fall. Before Frieza. Before they had become mere tools of destruction. Do you see now? King Vegeta III appeared beside him, walking in step as if this were perfectly natural. Do you understand what was lost? We were more than warriors, Vegeta said, the realization striking him with unexpected force. We had culture, civilization, purpose beyond conquest. We were a kingdom, the ancient king agreed. A society. And you, as prince, were heir not just to power but to all of this. The responsibility of preserving and protecting an entire way of life. But it's gone, Vegeta protested. All of it destroyed. How can I be responsible for something that no longer exists? King Vegeta III stopped walking and turned to face his descendant. Is it truly gone? Or has it simply changed form? You have the opportunity, Vegeta. The opportunity that no king has had in generations. You can decide what it means to be a Saiyan for the future. Not bound by the corruption of the past or the brutality we became, but informed by the nobility we once possessed. The vision shifted again, and Vegeta found himself in what appeared to be a throne room. A massive chair carved from a single piece of black crystal sat on a raised platform, the royal crest emblazoned behind it. But the throne was empty. The crimson crown is not a transformation in the traditional sense, King Vegeta III explained, his form beginning to fade. It is not a multiplication of power or a new level of strength. It is authority made manifest. When you wear the crimson crown, you embody the totality of Saiyan royal heritage. Every king who came before you, every drop of royal blood, every tradition and duty and responsibility of the throne. But there is no throne anymore, Vegeta said. Then create one, the ancient king responded simply. Not a physical throne, but a new purpose. A new understanding of what Saiyan royalty means in this age. That is your trial, Vegeta, not to reclaim what was lost, but to forge something new from the ashes. The vision began to dissolve, but before it faded completely, King Vegeta III spoke one final time. You are closer than you think. The Crimson Resonance recognizes you now. Soon, very soon, the awakening will come. But only if you continue on this path. Only if you truly accept what you are and what you can become. Vegeta woke, with a start, dawn light streaming through the bedroom window. Bulma stirred beside him but didn't wake. He lay there for a long moment, processing the vision, feeling that strange certainty that had been growing in him over the past few days. He was on the right path. The Crimson Crown was not some impossible dream or genetic memory beyond his reach. It was real, it was achievable, and he was closer to it than he'd ever been to Ultra Instinct or any other transformation. But achieving it required more than training. It required transformation of a different kind, not of body, but of identity. He needed to stop being Vegeta the rival, Vegeta the second best, Vegeta the eternal runner-up. He needed to become Vegeta the prince, in full truth and meaning. And for the first time in his life, he thought he might actually know how to do that. The day passed in a blur of activity. Vegeta trained, but differently, combining physical conditioning with meditation, testing the limits of his body while trying to maintain the mental clarity he'd been developing. The Crimson Resonance came and went in brief flashes, never sustained but growing more frequent. Trunks joined him for part of the afternoon, and true to his word, Vegeta allowed Bra to watch from the sidelines. She sat quietly, for the most part, and watched with wide eyes as father and son sparred. And Vegeta found, to his surprise, that having his children present didn't distract from his training. Instead, it added a new dimension to it. He was teaching Trunks, yes, but more than that, he was demonstrating. Showing his children what it meant to be a Saiyan, what it meant to be strong, what it meant to carry on a legacy. He was being what a prince should be, not the strongest warrior in the universe, but a father, a mentor, a keeper of traditions who could pass them on to the next generation. As the sun set and the training session wound down, Vegeta stood with his children on either side of him, looking out over West City. Trunks was breathing hard from the workout, and Bra was chattering excitedly about all the cool moves she'd seen. "Father," Trunks said during a quiet moment, "can I ask you something?" "What is it?" "That new energy I've been sensing from you lately, the red flickers, is that something I could learn? Is it a Saiyan technique?" Vegeta considered the question carefully. "It may be," he said honestly, "but I don't fully understand it myself yet. When I do, when I've mastered it, then perhaps I can teach you. If it's something that can be taught, is it stronger than Super Saiyan Blue?" Bra asked, because of course she'd been listening. "Strength isn't always about raw power," Vegeta found himself saying, channeling words that could have come from King Vegeta III himself. "Sometimes it's about purpose, about understanding who you are and what you're fighting for. That kind of strength." He paused, searching for the right words. "That kind of strength is something you carry inside you, regardless of what transformation you can or can't access." Trunks looked at his father with something like wonder. That's really wise, father." Vegeta felt an uncomfortable warmth in his chest. Praise from his son shouldn't affect him so much. He was a warrior, a prince, above such sentiment. But it did affect him. It mattered, because Trunks' respect, Bra's admiration, Bulma's love, these things were not weaknesses to be hidden away. They were the foundation of a different kind of strength. Late that night, after his family had gone to sleep, Vegeta returned to the gravity chamber one final time. Not to train, but to sit in meditation as he had been practicing. The gravity was off entirely, just him, alone in the darkness, with nothing but his thoughts and that strange crimson presence that seemed to grow stronger each day. He let his mind wander through everything he'd learned, every vision he'd experienced, every conversation that had shifted his perspective. He thought about the ancient Saiyan culture, about his father's harsh teachings, about the long road from villain to hero that he'd walked over the decades. He thought about Goku, not with anger or jealousy, but with something closer to understanding. Goku had never been his enemy. Goku was just Goku, a pure-hearted warrior who fought for the joy of it, who protected because it was the right thing to do, whose strength came from a place of such fundamental simplicity that it was almost elegant. Vegeta's strength would have to come from somewhere else. Not from simplicity, but from complexity. Not from joy, but from duty. Not from being carefree, but from carrying the weight of legacy with pride. And that was okay. That was actually perfect, because it meant they were walking parallel paths rather than competing on the same one. The realization brought with it a wave of something Vegeta hadn't felt in years: relief. The crushing pressure of constant comparison lifted, just slightly. He didn't need to be Goku. He didn't need to surpass Goku. He just needed to be Vegeta, the absolute best version of Vegeta he could become. And in that moment of acceptance, of release, something fundamental shifted. The crimson resonance that had been flickering at the edges of his consciousness suddenly roared to life. His aura exploded outward, but instead of the familiar white or blue, it burned deep red, the color of arterial blood, of life itself, of royal heritage made manifest. Vegeta's eyes snapped open, glowing with crimson light. He could feel it coursing through him. Not a transformation, not yet, but a recognition. The crimson crown acknowledging that he was finally, truly ready to claim it. But even as the power surged, Vegeta instinctively pulled it back. He wasn't ready to fully awaken it. Not here, not like this. This was just a taste, a promise of what was to come. The full manifestation would require more, a catalyst, a moment of truth, a final acceptance of everything he'd learned. The crimson aura faded, leaving Vegeta kneeling on the floor of the gravity chamber, breathing hard but smiling, actually smiling, with anticipation. Soon, very soon, the Prince of all Saiyans would finally claim his birthright. The morning sun rose over Capsule Corporation, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold that reminded Vegeta, not unpleasantly, of his destroyed homeworld's triple sunrise. He stood on the same balcony where he'd spoken with Trunks days ago, a steaming cup of coffee in his hands. Bulma had insisted he needed to start his mornings with something other than immediate combat training, and surprisingly, he'd found the ritual almost meditative, almost being the operative word. His Saiyan instincts still screamed at him to be in the gravity chamber, pushing his limits, but the lessons from his visions had taught him patience. The Crimson Crown wouldn't be claimed through brute force alone. "You're up early," Bulma's voice came from behind him. She emerged onto the balcony wrapped in a robe, her blue hair slightly disheveled from sleep. "And you're not training? Should I be worried?" "I am training," Vegeta replied, taking a sip of coffee. "Just not in the way you'd recognize." Bulma came to stand beside him, leaning against the railing. "The meditation thing is really working for you, isn't it?" "It's productive," Vegeta admitted grudgingly. He still wasn't comfortable discussing his emotional journey with anyone, even Bulma, but she'd been patient with him. "The visions are becoming clearer, more frequent. Last night, I felt the power of the Crimson Crown properly for the first time." Bulma's eyes widened. "Really? What was it like?" Vegeta struggled to find words adequate to describe the experience. "It was like remembering something I'd forgotten. Or perhaps discovering something I'd always known but never acknowledged. The power was immense, but controlled. Calm. It felt." He paused, searching for the right word. "Royal, Bulma repeated with a slight smile. "That's very you." "What's that supposed to mean?" Vegeta asked, but there was no real heat in his tone. "It means that for all your talk about being a warrior, you've always carried yourself like royalty. Even when you were working for Frieza, even when you were at your lowest, there was always this dignity about you. This refusal to truly bow to anyone." Bulma's expression softened. "I think that's what I found attractive about you in the first place. Not the power, but the pride." Vegeta felt that uncomfortable warmth in his chest again. "You're being sentimental." "I'm being honest," Bulma corrected. "And if this Crimson Crown thing is about embracing your royal heritage, then you're probably closer to achieving it than you think. Because underneath all the bluster and competition with Goku, you've always been a prince first." The words resonated with something deep in Vegeta's consciousness. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps he'd been overthinking this, trying to become something he already was instead of simply acknowledging it. "I need to go to the archives," Vegeta said suddenly, an idea forming. "Your databases had fragmentary information about ancient Saiyan culture. I want to review everything again, see if there's something I missed." "At 6 in the morning? Bulma raised an eyebrow. "The archives don't require specific hours," Vegeta pointed out. "True," Bulma conceded. "Want some company? I could help you search. 4 eyes are better than 2, and I might spot connections you miss." Vegeta's first instinct was to refuse. This was his journey, his responsibility. But he caught himself. Accepting help wasn't weakness. It was the act of a leader who recognized the value of his advisors. "Fine," he said. "But finish your coffee first." "Even I can wait 20 minutes. Bulma's surprised smile was worth the minor concession. The Capsule Corporation archives were a marvel of technology and organization, holographic storage systems containing petabytes of data collected from across the galaxy. Bulma had spent years compiling information from every available source. Galactic Patrol databases, recovered Frieza Force records, even fragments of data from the ancient Namekian archives. Now, she and Vegeta sat in the central hub, surrounded by floating holographic displays showing various aspects of Saiyan history. Vegeta had been at this for 3 hours, his eyes scanning text and images with the same intensity he brought to analyzing opponents in battle. "Here's something interesting," Bulma said, highlighting a particular passage. "This is from a recovered fragment of what appears to be a Saiyan philosophical text. Listen to this. The warrior seeks strength through conflict. The prince finds strength through purpose. When these two paths align, when the warrior and the prince become one, then true power manifests, not as destruction, but as authority that cannot be questioned." Vegeta leaned forward, reading the passage himself. "Authority that cannot be questioned," he murmured. "That's what I felt last night. Not power that overwhelms through force, but presence that compels recognition. It's a fundamentally different approach to strength, Bulma observed, her scientific mind working through the implications. Most Saiyan transformations are about multiplication, taking your base power and amplifying it. But this sounds like it operates on a different principle entirely. It's about legitimacy, about the right to command. The blood resonance, Vegeta said, remembering the term from their previous research. The connection between royalty and the planet itself. Except planet Vegeta is gone, so what am I connecting to? Bulma was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then she said, maybe it's not about the physical planet. Maybe it's about the concept, the legacy, the accumulated weight of generations of Saiyan kings. Like a spiritual inheritance that exists independent of physical space. The idea made a strange kind of sense. Vegeta had felt that weight in his visions, not the gravity of a planet, but the gravity of history, of responsibility, of being the last true inheritor of an ancient royal line. Show me everything about the trial of sovereignty again, Vegeta commanded. Bulma pulled up the relevant files. The information was still frustratingly fragmentary, but there were a few key details. The trial begins when the prince questions his own worthiness. It is not imposed from without, but emerges from within, a manifestation of the royal blood seeking to prove itself. The prince will receive visions of his ancestors, teachings from those who wore the crown before him. Each vision is a lesson, each lesson a step toward understanding. When understanding is complete, when the prince can stand before the universe and proclaim his identity without doubt or hesitation, the Crimson Crown manifests. That's what's been happening, Vegeta said, a mixture of excitement and trepidation in his voice. The visions, the lessons, all of it. I've been in the trial of sovereignty without even realizing it. Which means you're getting close to the end, Bulma reasoned. The question is, what's the final step? What understanding are you still missing? Vegeta stood abruptly, pacing the archives with restless energy. The vision showed me what it meant to be a king, responsibility, purpose, legacy. I've accepted that I need to define myself independently of Kakarot. I've acknowledged that strength comes from more than just power. So what's left? Maybe, Bulma suggested carefully, you need to actually claim it. Not just understand it intellectually, but truly, fully accept that you are the prince of all Saiyans, not as a title you inherited, but as an identity you've earned through everything you've been through. The words struck home. Vegeta had always thought of his princehood as a birthright, something he possessed by default. But what if it was more than that? What if becoming a true prince required not just royal blood, but the experiences, the struggles, the growth that had defined his life? He'd been born a prince. But perhaps he needed to choose to be one. I need to train, Vegeta said, but this time the words carried a different weight. Not physical conditioning. Something else. I need to meditate on this. To truly confront what it means. Bulma nodded understanding. Go. I'll keep researching, see if I can find anything else that might help. Vegeta was already moving toward the door, his mind racing with possibilities. The final step was close. He could feel it, taste it, almost grasp it. The Crimson Crown awaited, but first, he needed to complete his own internal transformation. The gravity chamber had become a sanctuary of sorts, a place where Vegeta could be alone with his thoughts and his heritage. He sat in the center of the spherical room, gravity set to 500 times normal, enough to require focus but not enough to be a distraction. His eyes were closed, his breathing measured. The meditation came easier now after days of practice. The chaotic noise of his thoughts had quieted to a manageable hum, and beneath it, he could sense that crimson presence, patient, waiting, ready to manifest fully when he was prepared to receive it. I am Vegeta, he said aloud, speaking to the empty chamber. Or perhaps to the spirits of his ancestors that he increasingly felt surrounding him. Prince of all Saiyans. Heir to the royal bloodline, the last true inheritor of my people's legacy. The words felt hollow, rote. They were facts, but facts without weight. He tried again, digging deeper. I was born to be king of a mighty empire. That empire was destroyed before I could claim my throne. Everything I was supposed to be, everything I was raised to become, it all ended in fire and death. Pain laced through the words now. Real emotion, the grief he'd carried for decades without fully acknowledging it. I became a servant to the tyrant who murdered my people. I conquered worlds in his name. I killed innocents and told myself it was what Saiyans did, what I was meant to do. But it was a lie. I was a slave pretending to be a warrior, a prince who had forgotten what royalty truly meant. The admission cost him something, but speaking it aloud brought a strange relief. He never fully confronted the shame of those years, the way he degraded himself and his heritage in service to Frisia. Then I came to Earth. And I met Kakarot, no, Goku. I met Goku, and he showed me what I'd become. Not through words, but through example. He was everything I should have been, strong without cruelty, proud without arrogance, a warrior who fought to protect rather than destroy. Vegeta's fists clenched. Even now, even after all the growth and understanding, this part still hurt. I hated him for it. I hated him for being better than me when he had no right to be. He was low class, common, raised on a backwater planet by primitives. I was royalty, trained from birth, heir to the mightiest warrior race in the universe. And yet he surpassed me again and again and again. The crimson presence pulsed, responding to his emotional honesty. But somewhere along the way, I changed. I didn't notice it happening, or maybe I did and refused to acknowledge it. I stopped conquering and started protecting. I formed attachments I told myself I'd never need. I built a family. I became better. Vegeta opened his eyes, staring at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. I have been a prince, a slave, a villain, a warrior, a husband, a father, a protector. I have been all these things and more, and each role has shaped me, changed me, made me into someone different from who I was born to be. He stood slowly, his aura beginning to glow, white energy that had been his constant companion for decades. I am not the prince my father tried to raise. That person died with planet Vegeta. And perhaps that's what I've been mourning all this time. Not my people or my planet, but the person I was supposed to be, the destiny that was stolen from me. The white aura began to shift, hints of red bleeding through like blood diffusing through water. But I am still a prince. Not because of what I was born to be, but because of what I've become. I carry the legacy of the Saiyan race not through conquest or cruelty, but through pride and determination. I protect rather than destroy. I build rather than tear down. I pass my heritage to my children in a form that honors what my people should have been, not what they became. The red grew stronger, more dominant. Vegeta's voice rose with conviction. I am Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans. Not because I was born to a king, but because I have earned that title through every battle fought, every mistake learned from, every moment of growth. I am Prince of a dead race, and I carry that weight with pride. I am Prince of a broken legacy, and I will reforge it into something worthy. I am Prince without a kingdom, and I will make this entire universe my domain to protect. The transformation happened in an instant. The crimson aura exploded outward, filling the gravity chamber with light the color of freshly spilled blood. But unlike his previous glimpses of this power, this time it didn't flicker or fade. It solidified, strengthened, became as natural as breathing. Vegeta's hair remained black, a stark contrast to the golden yellow or cyan blue of other Super Saiyan forms. But now it was shot through with streaks of deep crimson that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. His eyes glowed ruby red, ancient and authoritative. His aura didn't rage or thrash like typical Saiyan transformations. Instead, it burned with controlled intensity, a crimson flame that spoke of power held in check rather than unleashed wildly. But the physical changes were only the surface. What Vegeta felt internally was far more profound. He could sense it, the weight of 15 generations of Saiyan kings, all channeling their essence through him. He felt King Vegeta III's wisdom, King Vegeta VIII's authority, and countless others whose names had been lost to time but whose spirits remained bound to the royal bloodline. They weren't controlling him or influencing his thoughts. They were simply there, present, adding their strength to his own. This was the Crimson Crown. This was the blood resonance. This was the power that came not from training or rage or even godly ki, but from accepting fully and completely who and what he was. I am the Prince of all Saiyans, Vegeta said, and this time the words carried weight that could bend reality itself. And I finally understand what that means. The gravity chamber's computer began beeping warnings. The energy readings were off the charts, unlike anything it had measured before. but Vegeta barely noticed. He was too busy marveling at this new state. This perfect fusion of warrior and prince, of power and purpose. He threw a punch experimentally, and the shockwave that resulted cracked the reinforced walls of the chamber. His speed had increased exponentially. But more than that, his movements carried an authority that transcended mere physical prowess. Each strike felt inevitable, unquestionable, as if reality itself recognized his right to command. Incredible, he breathed, examining his crimson-traced hands. The power flowing through him was immense. He couldn't quantify it precisely, but it felt at least comparable to Super Saiyan Blue evolution, possibly stronger. But that wasn't the most impressive aspect. The most impressive aspect was the control. Unlike other transformations that required constant focus to maintain, that drained stamina and pushed his body to its limits, the Crimson Crown felt effortless. Natural, as if he'd been meant to access this state all along, and had simply needed to remember how. Vegeta powered down slowly, letting the crimson aura fade. His hair returned to its normal black, his eyes to their typical dark color, but he could still feel the power lurking just beneath the surface, ready to be called upon instantly. It was part of him now, not a separate transformation he needed to struggle toward, but an aspect of his identity, as fundamental as his Saiyan heritage. He had done it. He had achieved the Crimson Crown. But even as pride and satisfaction filled him, Vegeta's warrior instincts kicked in. This power needed to be tested, pushed, understood fully. He needed to know its limits, its capabilities, how it compared to other transformations. And he knew exactly who could help him with that. Bulma looked up from her computer terminal as Vegeta entered her lab, and her eyes immediately widened. "You look different," she said, standing quickly. "What happened?" "Did you?" "I achieved it," Vegeta confirmed, unable to keep a note of pride from his voice. "The Crimson Crown. I understand it now, and I can access it at will." "That's amazing!" Bulma rushed over, her scientific curiosity warring with genuine happiness for her husband. "Can you show me?" "I want to see it, take readings." Later, Vegeta interrupted, but not unkindly. "Right now, I need to test it properly. And for that, I need Kakarot." Bulma's expression shifted to concern. "Vegeta, if you're about to use this new transformation to try and prove you're stronger than Goku..." "I'm not," Vegeta said, and meant it. "The Crimson Crown isn't about being stronger than Kakarot. It's about being strong in my own right, on my own terms. But I still need to understand its capabilities, and he's the best training partner I have." Bulma studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You really have changed, haven't you? This isn't about rivalry anymore. It's about being the best version of myself I can be," Vegeta replied. "And understanding this new power is part of that. Can you contact Kakarot for me?" "Sure," Bulma agreed, moving back to her terminal. "Though knowing Goku, he's probably already sensed that something's different about your energy, and is on his way here." As if on cue, an energy signature appeared outside Capsule Corporation, one that Vegeta would recognize anywhere. He smiled slightly. Bulma knew the fool too well. Goku stood in the training area behind Capsule Corp, his expression excited but also curious. "Vegeta! I felt something crazy from your energy earlier. It was like your ki completely transformed, but in a way I've never sensed before." "What was that?" Vegeta descended from the building's upper levels, landing lightly in front of his eternal rival. "That," he said simply, "was me achieving something I've been working toward. A transformation unique to Saiyan royalty." Goku's eyes lit up with pure enthusiasm. "Really? A royal-only transformation? That's so cool. Can you show me? I want to see what it looks like." There was no jealousy in Goku's voice, no competitive edge. Just genuine excitement at the prospect of seeing something new. It was quintessentially Goku, able to be happy for others' achievements even when it meant he couldn't access the same power himself. Vegeta had spent so many years resenting this quality about Goku. Now, though, he found it almost refreshing. At least he knew the fool's enthusiasm was genuine. "I can do better than show you," Vegeta said. "I can let you test it directly. Spar with me, Kakarot. Help me understand the limits of this power." "Yes." Goku pumped his fist in excitement. "I was hoping you'd say that. Should we start at base form or..." Skip straight to blue, Vegeta interrupted. I want to see how the Crimson Crown compares to our strongest forms. A flicker of surprise crossed Goku's face. Vegeta rarely suggested they start at maximum power, but he nodded eagerly. Okay. Just promise you'll tell me all about this transformation afterward. I'm super curious about how it works. Both warriors stepped back, putting distance between them. The air itself seemed to thicken with anticipation as they prepared to power up. Goku went first, his aura exploding outward in brilliant blue as he ascended through Super Saiyan God, and finally Super Saiyan Blue in rapid succession. His hair shifted from black to gold to red to cyan, his eyes matching the brilliant color of his final transformation. Power radiated from him in waves that would have intimidated most beings in the universe. Vegeta smirked. Then he let the Crimson Crown awaken. The transformation was instantaneous. None of the screaming or straining that typically accompanied Saiyan power-ups. One moment Vegeta stood in his base form, the next he was wreathed in crimson power, his hair traced with red, his eyes glowing with royal authority. The aura that surrounded him was different from Super Saiyan Blue's. Less wild, more controlled, but no less powerful. Goku's jaw literally dropped. Whoa, he breathed. That's incredible, Vegeta. The energy feels completely different from Blue, but I can tell it's really strong, and you didn't even have to power up gradually. It was just instant. The Crimson Crown, Vegeta explained, settling into a fighting stance. Also called Crimson Rain in some ancient texts. It's the manifestation of Saiyan royal authority, a power that comes not from rage or training alone, but from accepting one's heritage and purpose. That's amazing, Goku said sincerely. I'm really happy for you, Vegeta. You look like you found something that's really yours, you know? The words struck Vegeta more deeply than Goku probably intended. Yes, that was exactly what he'd found, something that was truly his, that Goku couldn't simply copy or stumble into through luck. A power that belonged to him by right of blood and earned through understanding. Enough talk, Vegeta said, though there was no real bite to his tone. Come at me with everything you have, Kakarot. Let's see what the Prince of all Saiyans can truly do. Goku's expression shifted to his battle-ready grin, and then they moved. The clash was immediate and devastating. Goku opened with a Kamehameha, the massive blue beam of energy capable of destroying planets. Vegeta didn't dodge. Instead, he raised one hand, and crimson energy formed a barrier that not only blocked the attack but seemed to absorb and dissipate it with minimal effort. Impossible! Goku shouted, but his tone was more excited than concerned. He blurred forward, his fists moving at speeds that would be invisible to most observers. Vegeta met him blow for blow, and immediately both warriors recognized something extraordinary. The Crimson Crown's power was remarkable, but what truly set it apart was the nature of that power. When Vegeta blocked Goku's strikes, there was an authority to it, as if his defenses carried an inherent right to exist that made them harder to penetrate. When he counterattacked, his strikes seemed to carry more weight than their raw power should allow. You're not just stronger, Goku observed between exchanges, his analytical combat mind working even in the midst of battle. Your attacks feel heavier somehow. More important, authority, Vegeta replied, launching a devastating combination that forced Goku back. The Crimson Crown doesn't just multiply my power. It makes every action I take carry the weight of royal decree. My attacks aren't just strong, they're backed by the authority of 15 generations of Saiyan kings. That's so cool. Goku genuinely meant it. He powered up further, his blue aura intensifying as he pushed Super Saiyan Blue to its limits. But let's see how it handles this. What followed was a display of combat that would have left most of the Z-fighters speechless. Goku and Vegeta moved at relativistic speeds, their strikes creating shockwaves that rippled across the landscape. Energy blasts filled the air, each one capable of leveling mountains. The ground beneath them cracked and cratered from the sheer pressure of their clashing auras. But what impressed Vegeta most was how natural the Crimson Crown felt. Unlike Super Saiyan Blue, which required constant focus to maintain and drain stamina at a frightening rate, fighting in Crimson Rain felt effortless. The power flowed through him as naturally as breathing, and he could sense that he could maintain it for hours without tiring. More than that, the combat instincts that came with the transformation were remarkable. It was as if the accumulated experience of all his royal ancestors was informing his movements, giving him tactical insights that went beyond his own considerable skill. When Goku launched a complex feint followed by a powerful kick, Vegeta didn't just react. He predicted it, his body moving to counter before Goku had fully committed to the attack. It wasn't Ultra Instinct's automatic movement, but rather something different, a battle wisdom that came from generations of warrior kings flowing through his consciousness. "You're reading my moves before I make them," Goku said, pulling back slightly. His expression was fascinated rather than frustrated. "Is that part of the transformation too?" "In a sense," Vegeta acknowledged. "I'm drawing on the combat experience of every king in my bloodline. It's not precognition, but it gives me insight that goes beyond my own training." "Man, that's really something special," Goku said, powering down slightly from his maximum blue output. "I think in terms of raw power, we're pretty evenly matched. Maybe you're even a bit stronger right now, but the way your power works is so different from anything I've seen. It's not just about strength, it's like your energy has personality? Authority? I'm not sure how to describe it." Vegeta powered down as well, the crimson aura fading as he returned to base form. He was breathing harder than when he'd started, but only slightly. The stamina drain had been minimal, another advantage of the Crimson Crown. "It's a different kind of power," Vegeta agreed. "Not better or worse than Ultra Instinct or your other techniques," Goku wrote. "Just different. Uniquely mine." And that was the truth of it. For the first time in his life, Vegeta possessed a power that was truly his own, not a variation of something Goku had achieved first, or a desperate attempt to match his rival's latest breakthrough. The Crimson Crown belonged to him by right of heritage and by virtue of the journey he'd undertaken to achieve it. "I'm really glad you found this," Goku said sincerely, clapping Vegeta on the shoulder in a gesture of genuine friendship. "You seem, I don't know, more centered? More at peace with yourself." Vegeta didn't shrug off the contact, which would have surprised his younger self immensely. "I am," he admitted. "For the first time in decades, I'm not defining myself in opposition to you," Goku wrote. "I'm not measuring my worth by whether I can surpass you. I'm simply being who I am." Goku's smile was bright and genuine. "That's great. And hey, now we both have our own special techniques that the other can't copy. You've got your Royal Crimson Crown thing, and I've got Ultra Instinct. We're both walking our own paths." The observation was so perfectly Goku, simple, direct, and cutting right to the heart of the matter, that Vegeta actually chuckled. "I suppose we are. Though don't think this means I'm going to stop trying to get stronger. I still intend to surpass you eventually." "Good." Goku laughed. "I wouldn't want you to stop pushing me. That's what makes training so fun. But now it feels different, you know? Not like we're competing to prove who's better, but like we're both trying to reach our own peaks and helping each other get there." Vegeta nodded slowly. That was exactly what it felt like, not a race where only one could win, but two warriors on parallel paths, each striving for their own form of perfection while supporting each other's growth. It was, actually, kind of nice. Later that evening, after Goku had left and the excitement had settled, Vegeta found himself in Bulma's lab undergoing a series of tests. She'd insisted on taking detailed readings of the Crimson Crown transformation, and Vegeta had agreed. Understanding the scientific principles behind the power could only help him master it further. "This is fascinating," Bulma murmured, studying the holographic displays showing Vegeta's energy patterns. "Your key signature in this form is completely unique. It's not just a multiplication of your base power. It's like your energy is vibrating at a different frequency entirely." "What does that mean in practical terms?" Vegeta asked from where he stood in the center of the scanning array, currently transformed into Crimson Rain. "It means that this isn't just another Super Saiyan transformation," Bulma explained, manipulating the displays to show different aspects of the data. Super Saiyan Blue, even Ultra Instinct. They all work by amplifying or refining your existing ki. But the Crimson Crown seems to be tapping into something else entirely. "A different energy source. The blood resonance," Vegeta said. "The connection to my royal heritage." "Exactly," Bulma confirmed. "And here's what's really interesting. Your stamina drain in this form is minimal. Look at these readouts from your spar with Goku." You maintain maximum power output for nearly 30 minutes, and your energy reserves only dropped by about 15%. Vegeta's eyes widened slightly. That's significantly better than blue. Significantly better than anything we've measured, Bulma corrected. Even Ultra Instinct has tremendous stamina costs. But the Crimson Crown seems to be naturally efficient. My hypothesis is that because you're drawing on ancestral power rather than just multiplying your own, the energy cost is distributed across generations of Saiyan kings, in a metaphysical sense. The idea was both strange and compelling. Vegeta could feel the truth of it. When he fought in Crimson Rain, he wasn't alone. The strength of his ancestors flowed through him, supporting him, making the burden of power easier to bear. There's something else, Bulma said, pulling up a new set of readings. Your physical parameters, strength, speed, durability, they're all enhanced to roughly the same level as Super Saiyan Blue evolution. But there's an additional factor I can't quite quantify. Something about the way your energy interacts with the environment around you. Authority, Vegeta supplied. Every action I take in this form carries the weight of royal decree. It's not just physical power, it's a metaphysical assertion of my right to command reality itself. Bulma stared at him. That's actually kind of terrifying when you put it that way. You're essentially imposing your will on the universe through sheer force of royal legitimacy? In a manner of speaking, Vegeta confirmed. Though it has limits. I'm not a god or a reality warper, but within the scope of combat, within the domain of warriors' conflict, my authority makes my actions more effective than raw power alone would suggest. Incredible, Bulma breathed, making notes frantically. This is going to revolutionize our understanding of how ki and transformation work. If power can come from sources other than just physical training or divine energy, if heritage and identity can manifest as tangible strength. She trailed off, lost in thought. Vegeta powered down, the crimson aura fading, and stepped out of the scanning array. Learn what you can from the data, he said. But remember, this isn't just science. It's something more. I know, Bulma replied, looking up at him with a mixture of pride and affection. It's magic, in its own way. The magic of being who you truly are. Vegeta felt that warmth in his chest again, the one that appeared whenever his family showed him unconditional support. He still wasn't comfortable with sentiment, probably never would be, but he was learning to accept it rather than push it away. Thank you, he said quietly, for helping me find this path. For supporting me even when you didn't fully understand what I was searching for. Bulma smiled and crossed the distance between them, wrapping her arms around him in a hug he only stiffened against for a moment before returning. That's what partners do, she said. We support each other's growth, even when the journey is strange and confusing. They stood like that for a moment, prince and scientist, warrior and inventor, two people from completely different worlds who had somehow built a life together. Then Bulma pulled back with a mischievous grin. So, now that you've achieved this incredible new transformation and proven you're just as special as Goku in your own way, what's next? Going to take over the universe? Challenge Beerus to a rematch? Nothing so dramatic, Vegeta replied, but there was a hint of satisfaction in his tone. I'm going to continue training, continue growing, continue being the best prince of all Saiyans I can be, and when threats come, because they always do, I'll be ready to face them with power that's truly mine. Sounds like a plan, Bulma agreed. Though maybe take a break from the gravity chamber for a day or two. You've been pushing really hard, and even with your new stamina-efficient transformation, you could use some rest. Vegeta wanted to argue, wanted to insist that there was no time for rest, that he needed to continue pushing forward. But he caught himself. That was old thinking, the desperate drive to constantly improve that had nearly destroyed him in the past. He was on a new path now. And sometimes, the strongest thing a warrior could do was know when to rest. Fine, he said. 1 day. Then I resumed training. 2 days, Bulma countered. 1.5. Deal. That night, Vegeta stood once again on the balcony, looking out over West City. But this time, Trunks joined him, not for conversation, but simply for company. Father and son stood side by side in comfortable silence, watching the lights of the city twinkle below. Father, Trunks said eventually, I felt your new transformation during your spar with Goku. It was remarkable. different from anything you've shown before. It's called the Crimson Crown, Vegeta replied. Or Crimson Rain. A power unique to Saiyan royalty. Could I learn it? Trunks asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice rather than demand or entitlement. Vegeta considered the question carefully. I don't know, he admitted. You carry royal blood through me, but you're also half human. The blood resonance, the connection to ancestral power. I don't know if it works the same for you. But it might? It might, Vegeta agreed. But even if you can't access the Crimson Crown specifically, there may be other powers unique to you. Your hybrid nature isn't a weakness, Trunks. It's a strength that opens possibilities neither pure Saiyans nor pure humans could access alone. Trunks was quiet for a moment, processing this. You've changed, father. You seem... I don't know how to describe it. More complete, maybe? I understand myself better, Vegeta said. For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to be something I'm not. I'm not chasing someone else's achievements, or measuring my worth against external standards. I'm simply being who I am, Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans. And that's enough. That sounds really healthy, Trunks observed with a slight smile. Mom will be pleased that you're finally working through your issues. Vegeta shot his son a look that was meant to be stern but came out more amused than anything. Don't get smart with me, boy. Too late, Trunks replied cheerfully. I'm your son. Smart comes with the territory. Despite himself, Vegeta chuckled. His children were growing up well, strong, but also kind. Powerful, but also grounded. Everything that Saiyans should have been before corruption and conquest twisted their culture into something monstrous. This was his legacy now. Not conquest or destruction, but family and protection. Not proving himself the strongest, but being the best father, husband, and warrior he could be. The Crimson Crown had given him power, yes. But more importantly, it had given him clarity. A clear understanding of who he was and what he stood for. And standing here with his son, looking out over a world he'd come to call home, Vegeta felt something he rarely experienced: contentment. The journey wasn't over. There would be new challenges, new threats, new opportunities to grow stronger. But he was ready for them now in a way he'd never been before. Because he finally knew who he was, the Prince of all Saiyans. Not because he was born to it, but because he'd earned it, and that made all the difference. Miles away, in a dimension beyond mortal comprehension, two divine beings observed Vegeta's achievement with interest. Fascinating, Whis commented, his staff glowing softly as it displayed scenes from Vegeta's recent transformation. I didn't expect him to achieve the Crimson Crown so quickly. Most princes who attempted the trial of sovereignty took years, if they succeeded at all. Lord Beerus, the god of destruction, opened one eye from where he lounged on his floating pillow. That Saiyan is stubborn, he muttered. Once he sets his mind to something, he doesn't stop until he achieves it. It's admirable, if exhausting to watch. Indeed, Whis agreed. And the power he's accessed is quite significant. Not on par with your destructive capabilities, of course, my lord, but certainly enough to make him a formidable force in the universe. Beerus closed his eye again, seemingly disinterested. As long as he keeps making himself useful as a training partner, and doesn't blow up the earth, I don't care what transformations he achieves. Of course, my lord, Whis said with his usual placid smile. But internally, the angel was genuinely pleased. He'd always seen potential in Vegeta. The prince's pride and determination were assets when properly directed. And now, finally, Vegeta seemed to have found his true path. It would be interesting to see where that path led. Come, my lord, Whis said, his staff beginning to glow. Let's return to your temple. I believe it's time for your afternoon snack. Finally, Beerus grumbled. Watching Saiyans have emotional breakthroughs makes me hungry. As the two divine beings departed, leaving Earth's dimension behind, the universe spun onward. And on that small blue planet, in a city of light and technology, a Saiyan prince stood with his family and felt, perhaps for the first time in his life, truly at peace with who he was. The Crimson Crown had been claimed, the path forward was clear, and Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, was ready for whatever came next. 3 weeks had passed since Vegeta's achievement of the Crimson Crown, and life at Capsule Corporation had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Vegeta trained daily, but with a newfound balance, pushing his limits while also taking time to rest, to meditate, to be present with his family. The desperate edge that had driven him to near self-destruction had mellowed into focused determination. He stood in the gravity chamber now, moving through a complex kata in his Crimson Rain form. The transformation had become second nature, as easy to access as his base Super Saiyan form had been decades ago. The crimson aura wrapped around him like a royal mantle, his hair traced with red highlights that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. "Computer, increase gravity to 700 times normal," he commanded, his voice steady despite the immense pressure already pressing down on him. The chamber complied, and Vegeta felt the weight increase but didn't falter. His body had adapted remarkably to the Crimson Crown's power, growing stronger with each training session. More importantly, his mind had found a clarity that had eluded him for years. He wasn't training to surpass Goku anymore. He was training to master his own power, to explore the depths of what the Crimson Crown could do, to become the absolute best version of himself. It was liberating in a way he never expected. A sudden spike in energy made Vegeta pause mid-strike. His senses, enhanced by the royal transformation, detected multiple power signatures appearing on Earth's surface. Strong signatures, far stronger than typical threats. His communicator beeped. Bulma's voice came through, tight with tension. "Vegeta, we've got a situation. Multiple unknown hostiles just appeared in West City. The power readings are off the charts." Vegeta powered down immediately, the crimson aura fading as he moved toward the chamber's exit. "I'm on my way." "Contact the others." "Already done," Bulma replied. "Goku's on his way, and I've alerted Piccolo and Gohan. These guys feel dangerous, Vegeta. Be careful." "I'm always careful," Vegeta said, which was a blatant lie, but Bulma didn't call him on it. She knew when to save the arguments for after the crisis. Vegeta launched himself into the air, rocketing toward West City proper. As he flew, he extended his senses, trying to get a read on these new arrivals. There were 3 distinct signatures, each one powerful enough to give him pause. Not god level, but certainly strong enough to be a serious threat. More concerning was the quality of their energy. It felt wrong somehow. Aggressive and chaotic, like barely controlled destruction given form. He arrived at the scene within seconds, touching down on a rooftop overlooking the main commercial district. What he saw made his eyes narrow. 3 beings stood in the middle of a plaza that civilians were frantically evacuating. They were humanoid but clearly not human. Their skin had a metallic sheen, their eyes glowed with an eerie purple light, and their armor looked organic, as if grown rather than forged. The tallest of the 3 stood at least 7 feet, his body corded with muscle that suggested immense physical power. The second was leaner, more agile-looking, with what appeared to be blade-like protrusions emerging from his forearms. The third was smaller but radiated an intensity that suggested he shouldn't be underestimated. Well, the tallest one said, his voice carrying across the plaza despite the distance. "The natives are more perceptive than expected. One has already come to challenge us." Vegeta descended slowly, landing in the plaza with his arms crossed. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but you've made a mistake coming to Earth. Leave now, and I'll let you live." The 3 beings laughed, a harsh, grating sound that set Vegeta's teeth on edge. "Such arrogance," the lean one said, his blade arms glinting in the sunlight. "Typical of primitives who don't understand the hierarchy of power in this universe. We are the vanguard of supremacy," the tall one announced, as if that should mean something. "Emissaries of Lord Carice, ruler of Universe 6 Shadow Territories. We've come to this backwater dimension to claim worthy warriors for our Lord's arena, Universe 6. That got Vegeta's attention. He'd met Saiyans from Universe 6, Kaba, Caulifla, Kale. They'd been allies during the Tournament of Power. But these beings didn't feel anything like those warriors. "Universe 6 has no authority here," Vegeta said coldly. "And Earth is under the protection of Universe 7's God of Destruction. If your Lord Carice wants to start an interdimensional incident, he's welcome to try." "Lord Beerus?" The small one spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly deep. "We know of the Destroyer God. We also know he sleeps more than he intervenes. By the time he bothers to wake, we'll have taken what we came for and returned home." A new energy signature appeared. "Goku, materializing via instant transmission a few feet away from Vegeta. "Hey! What's going on?" Bulma said there was trouble. "Kakarot," Vegeta acknowledged without taking his eyes off the three intruders. "We have visitors from Universe 6. They claim to be here collecting warriors." Goku's expression shifted from casual to serious in an instant. "Warriors? Like kidnapping people?" His voice carried an edge that few beings ever heard, the steel beneath the friendly exterior. "Kidnapping is such an ugly word," the tall one said. "We prefer recruiting. Though admittedly, compliance isn't optional." "Then you've definitely come to the wrong planet," Goku said, dropping into a fighting stance. "We don't let people get taken against their will. You should leave before this gets ugly." The three beings exchanged glances, then began to laugh again. "How delightful," the lean one said. "Two primitives who think they can threaten the vanguard. Lord Carice warned us this universe had produced some anomalously strong fighters, but I didn't expect such immediate entertainment." "I'll take the short one," the small being said, pointing at Vegeta with obvious disdain. Vegeta's eye twitched. "Short one. After all these years on Earth, after all his growth and achievements, people still felt compelled to comment on his height." "Fine," the tall one said. "I'll handle the one with the ridiculous hair. Zeros, you can watch and intervene if needed." The lean one, Zeros, nodded, his blade arms folding across his chest. "Don't take too long. Lord Carice expects us back within the cycle." The small being cracked his knuckles and grinned at Vegeta. "My name is Grax. I'm going to enjoy breaking you, little prince." "Little prince?" Vegeta's voice was dangerously quiet. "How do you know that title?" "We've done our research," Grax replied. "The last survivor of the Saiyan race's royal bloodline. A has-been prince of a dead world, clinging to delusions of grandeur." How pathetic. Something cold settled in Vegeta's chest. These beings had specifically researched him, knew about his heritage. This wasn't a random raid, it was targeted. "Vegeta," Goku said quietly, sensing his friend's tension, "stay focused. Don't let them get in your head." But Grax wasn't finished. "We know all about you, Vegeta. Your failures, your humiliations, how you're always second best to your rival here. Lord Carice finds your particular brand of impotent rage amusing. He thinks you'd make an excellent addition to his collection of broken champions." Vegeta's fists clenched. He could feel anger rising, the old familiar fury that had driven him for so many years. But beneath it, he also felt something else, the calm center he'd discovered through achieving the Crimson Crown. These words were meant to provoke him, to throw him off balance. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "Enough talk," Vegeta said, his voice level despite the rage simmering beneath. "Let's see if your power matches your arrogance." Both warriors powered up simultaneously. Goku's aura exploded in brilliant blue as he ascended directly to Super Saiyan Blue, his hair and eyes shifting to that distinctive cyan color. Vegeta called upon the Crimson Crown, his transformation instantaneous. Black hair gaining red highlights, eyes glowing ruby, crimson aura wrapping around him like a royal cloak. The two Universe 6 beings paused, reassessing their opponents as the power readings spiked dramatically. "Well," the tall one said, "perhaps this will be entertaining after all." Then the battle began. Goku moved first, his speed incredible even by divine standards. He closed the distance to the tall warrior in a heartbeat, launching a combination of strikes that would have pulverized mountains. The Universe 6 fighter blocked each blow, but Vegeta could see he was being pushed back, forced to defend rather than counter. Good. Kakarot could handle his opponent. Vegeta turned his attention to Grax, who was watching him with an expression of eager anticipation. "Come then, little prince. Show me this Crimson Crown power our intelligence reported. Let's see if it's worth the legendary status your pathetic race assigned to it." Vegeta didn't respond with words. He simply moved. The Crimson Crown's speed enhancement allowed him to cross the distance in a fraction of a second. His fist, backed by royal authority and Saiyan strength, slammed into Grax's guard with devastating force. The shockwave from the impact shattered windows in nearby buildings and cracked the plaza's stone flooring. Grax skidded backward, his boots tearing furrows in the ground, but he was grinning. "Not bad. You actually made me feel that one." He retaliated with a burst of purple energy, a beam attack that Vegeta dodged by a hair's breadth. The energy carved a molten channel through the plaza behind him, demonstrating the attack's destructive potential. Vegeta countered with a barrage of ki blasts, each one precisely targeted and empowered by the Crimson Crown's authority. Grax weaved through them with surprising agility, his smaller size making him a difficult target. "You're fast," Grax acknowledged, "but speed alone won't save you." He vanished, not with a technique like instant transmission, but with pure velocity that even Vegeta's enhanced senses struggled to track. A fist materialized out of nowhere, catching Vegeta in the ribs with enough force to lift him off his feet and send him crashing through a decorative fountain. Vegeta emerged from the debris, water streaming off his armor, and wiped a trickle of blood from his lip. The hit had been solid. This Grax was genuinely powerful, likely on par with or above his own Super Saiyan Blue form in raw strength. But the Crimson Crown wasn't about raw strength alone. Vegeta powered up further, the crimson aura intensifying. He could feel the presence of his ancestors, their collective strength flowing through him. When he spoke, his voice carried layers of authority that transcended mere sound. "I am Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans. You dare mock my heritage? You dare belittle my people? I'll show you the power of royalty that your lord could never comprehend." Grax's grin faltered slightly. Something in Vegeta's tone had reached him, bypassing conscious thought to trigger a primal recognition of authority. The next exchange was different. Vegeta's strikes carry not just physical force but an imperious demand to be acknowledged. When his fist connected with Grax's guard, the Universe 6 warrior actually buckled, his defense crumbling under the weight of royal decree made manifest. "What?" Grax started, but Vegeta didn't give him time to process. A devastating knee to the midsection. An elbow to the temple. A ki blast at point-blank range that sent Grax tumbling across the plaza. Vegeta pressed his advantage relentlessly, each strike delivered with the confidence of a prince disciplining an insolent subject. Nearby, Goku's battle was intensifying as well. The tall warrior had transformed, his body bulking up and his purple aura darkening to near black. He and Goku traded blows that created sonic booms, their speed and power shaking the foundations of surrounding buildings. "You're strong!" Goku shouted, actually enjoying himself despite the danger. "What's your name?" "Karn," the tall warrior replied between strikes. "And you're not bad yourself, for a Universe 7 primitive. But you're still holding back. I can feel it. Show me your true power." Goku's expression grew serious. "If you insist. But I'm warning you, Ultra Instinct is really hard to control. Someone could get hurt. I'll take my chances." Karn roared, powering up even further. Vegeta felt Goku's energy shift, saw the telltale silver glow begin to manifest around his rival. Kakarot was preparing to use Ultra Instinct. Against a foe of this caliber, it made sense, but it also meant Vegeta needed to finish his own fight quickly or risk being overshadowed once again. Old thinking. He caught himself immediately. This wasn't about being overshadowed. This was about protecting Earth, defeating the threat, doing what needed to be done. But still, Grax had recovered from Vegeta's assault and was floating in the air, his expression no longer amused. "You're stronger than I expected, Prince. Much stronger. But I haven't shown you my full power either." His aura exploded outward, shifting from purple to a sickly green color that made Vegeta's instincts scream warnings. The energy felt corrupt somehow, like it was eating away at the natural order of things. "This is Lord Kuri's gift," Grax said, his voice taking on a distorted quality. "The power of entropy, of decay, of the inevitable heat-death of all things. Let's see your precious royal authority stand against the end of everything." He attacked with renewed ferocity, and immediately Vegeta understood the problem. Where Grax's strikes landed, they left behind traces of that green energy, and wherever that energy touched, things began to break down. Stone crumbled to dust. Metal rusted and flaked away. Even the air itself seemed to sicken and die. A glancing blow across Vegeta's arm left a burning sensation, and he looked down to see his armor corroding, the fabric of his GI actually decomposing. If a direct hit connected, if that entropy energy penetrated his defenses. "Now you understand," Grax crowed. "Lord Kuri's doesn't just grant power, he grants the fundamental force of universal decay. Your body, your energy, your very existence will crumble before me." Vegeta gritted his teeth and poured more power into the crimson crown. The crimson aura blazed brighter, pushing back against the entropy energy's corrupting influence. But he could feel the strain. This wasn't a fight he could win through endurance. That green energy would eventually eat through his defenses if the battle dragged on. He needed to finish this quickly. But how? Grax's speed matched his own, his power was comparable, and that entropy ability gave him a significant advantage in close combat. A direct confrontation would be grinding attrition, and attrition favored the opponent who could literally corrode their enemy's defenses. Think. He was a prince, heir to generations of tactical brilliance. There had to be a solution. Then it hit him. The Crimson Crown wasn't just about physical power or combat ability. It was about authority, about the right to command. And what was entropy but a violation of order, a descent into chaos? What if he could assert his authority not just through strikes, but through existence itself? Command reality to reject this corruption? It was a gamble. He'd never tried to use the Crimson Crown that way before. But desperate times called for innovation. Vegeta stopped dodging and planted his feet firmly on the ground. Grax saw the opportunity and lunged, his fists wreathed in that deadly green energy, aiming for a killing blow. Die, Prince! At the last possible moment, Vegeta's aura exploded outward, but it wasn't just power. It was a declaration, a royal decree spoken not with words but with the fundamental authority of his bloodline. I am Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans, and I reject your corruption. My existence is decreed by royal right. I will not fall. The crimson aura became solid, almost physical, forming a barrier around Vegeta's body. When Grax's entropy-laced fist struck that barrier, something impossible happened. The green energy scattered, dispersed, rejected by an authority that superseded physical laws. Grax's eyes widened in shock as his most powerful ability simply failed. Impossible! He gasped. Nothing can resist Lord Kuri's entropy. Your Lord, Vegeta said, his voice carrying absolute conviction, is not my sovereign. His power holds no authority over me. He grabbed Grax's extended arm and, with a burst of Crimson Crown-enhanced strength, hurled the smaller warrior skyward. Following up instantly, Vegeta appeared above him, both hands raised and gathering energy. Final flash. The massive golden beam erupted from Vegeta's hands, but as it traveled through his crimson aura, something changed. The gold took on red highlights, the energy itself transforming into something new, a technique powered not just by ki, but by royal decree. Crimson final flash. The attack engulfed Grax completely. His screams were audible for a moment, then swallowed by the overwhelming power of the blast. When the light faded, Grax hung in the air, his armor shattered, his body smoking, barely conscious. Vegeta allowed him to fall, watching dispassionately as the Universe 6 warrior crashed into the plaza below. He was still alive, Vegeta could sense his ki, but he was thoroughly defeated. One down, Vegeta turned his attention to the other battles. Goku had fully activated Ultra Instinct, his hair silver, his movements flowing like water. Karn was struggling, unable to land a single blow as Goku's body moved automatically to evade. It was only a matter of time before that fight ended. But then Vegeta noticed something that made his blood run cold. Zeros, the third member of the vanguard, was no longer just watching. He'd moved to the edge of the plaza and was drawing some kind of symbol in the air with his blade arms, purple energy trailing from the tips. And that energy was forming a pattern that made Vegeta's ancestral memories scream in recognition. A summoning circle. Kakarot! Vegeta shouted. The third one. But he was too late. Zeros completed the symbol, and reality tore. A rift opened in the air, not a portal, but an actual wound in space itself. And through that wound came something that made even Ultra Instinct Goku pause in his assault. It was massive, easily 50 feet tall, with a body that seemed to be composed of crystallized darkness. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but wrong in ways that hurt to look at directly. And its energy. Vegeta had faced gods. He'd sparred with Beerus, fought alongside Whis' training, stood before Zeno himself. But this thing's energy felt different from divine power. It felt like absence, like the void between stars given form and hunger. Behold! Zeros called out, his voice ecstatic. The Herald of Charis. A being of pure negation, created by my lord to consume all that stands before him. You may have defeated Grax, Saiyan Prince, but let's see how you fare against. He didn't get to finish. Goku, still in Ultra Instinct, appeared beside Zero's in a blur of silver light and delivered a chop to the back of his neck that dropped the warrior instantly. Sorry, Goku said, not sounding sorry at all. But we really can't let you finish evil speeches. They always make things worse. The Herald of Charis turned its attention, if something without discernible eyes could be said to have attention, toward the two Saiyans. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere, a sound like reality scraping against itself. Warriors. Strong. Consume. It moved with speed that defied its size, one massive arm sweeping toward Goku. Even with Ultra Instinct's automatic dodge, Goku barely evaded, the arm passing close enough to tear through his GI with wind pressure alone. That's fast, Goku said, his tone still excited despite the danger. And strong too. Vegeta, we might need to work together on this one. Vegeta wanted to argue, wanted to prove he could handle this threat alone, but he looked at the Herald, at the way space seemed to distort around it, at the sheer wrongness of its existence, and knew that pride would be suicide here. Fine, he said, floating up to stand beside Goku. But try to keep up, Kakarot. Despite everything, Goku grinned. That's my line. The Herald attacked again, this time targeting both of them. Its movements were predictable in a sense, straightforward, brutal, without technique or finesse. But the sheer power behind each strike made evasion mandatory. A single solid hit would be devastating. Goku flowed around the attacks with Ultra Instinct's precision, his body moving before his mind could process the danger. Vegeta relied on the Crimson Crown's enhanced perception and the combat wisdom of his ancestors, reading the Herald's movements and reacting with practiced efficiency. They counterattacked in sync, almost without needing to coordinate. Goku's silver-tinged strikes and Vegeta's crimson-enhanced blows rained down on the Herald's crystalline body, each impact creating cracks and fractures in its dark form. But the Herald was healing. Not regenerating in the traditional sense, but pulling itself back together, the darkness flowing like liquid to repair damage almost as quickly as they inflicted it. It's not working, Goku shouted. Every time we hurt it, it just fixes itself. Vegeta analyzed the situation, his mind racing. A being of pure negation, Zero's had called it. Created to consume. What if it wasn't truly alive in any meaningful sense? What if it was more like a natural disaster given form, a force rather than a creature? Kakarot, Vegeta called out. We need to destroy it completely. No gradual damage. One overwhelming attack that obliterates it entirely. Combined attack? Goku suggested immediately, understanding the implication. Vegeta's pride bristled at the idea. A combined attack meant acknowledging he couldn't do this alone, meant sharing the victory. But he looked at the Herald, at the destruction it could cause if left unchecked, at the city full of people who were depending on them. Sometimes, being a prince meant making the pragmatic choice over the prideful one. Fine, he agreed. On my mark. Pour everything you have into it. They broke apart, putting distance between themselves and the Herald. The creature tracked their movements with its non-existent gaze, perhaps sensing something dangerous about to occur. Goku raised his hands, energy gathering between his palms. The Kamehameha, his signature technique, refined over decades, now enhanced by Ultra Instinct's perfect energy control. The sphere of blue energy grew larger and larger, crackling with barely contained power. Vegeta mirrored the stance, his own hands coming together. The final flash, his pride, his legacy, his most devastating attack. But this time, empowered by the Crimson Crown, the energy took on that distinctive red tint. The Herald seemed to recognize danger. It charged toward them, moving faster than before, clearly intending to interrupt before they could complete their techniques. Not yet, Vegeta muttered, watching its approach with the calm of a predator timing the perfect strike. Not yet. 50 feet away. 30 feet. 20 feet. Now! Vegeta roared. Kamehameha. Final flash. The two beams erupted simultaneously, one blue and silver, one gold and crimson. They converged on the Herald from different angles, and where they met, something spectacular happened. The energies didn't just combine, they harmonized. The blue and red swirled together, creating a spiraling column of purple-white power that struck the herald with the force of a collapsing star. Ultra Instinct's perfect energy control merged with the Crimson Crown's absolute authority, creating a synergy that exceeded what either technique could accomplish alone. The herald's form, so resistant to their individual attacks, began to crack and shatter under the overwhelming assault. Its soundless scream was like reality itself crying out in pain. Fractures spread across its crystalline body, light pouring from the wounds, and then it exploded. The detonation was massive, a sphere of destructive energy that would have leveled half the city if not for Goku and Vegeta both instinctively creating barriers to contain it. Even with their protection, the shockwave rattled buildings and set off car alarms for miles. When the light faded, the herald was gone. Completely. Not even dust remained. Goku powered down from Ultra Instinct, staggering slightly as the toll of the transformation caught up with him. Phew! That was intense. Good thinking on the combined attack, Vegeta. Vegeta powered down as well, the crimson aura fading as he returned to base form. He was breathing hard. The fight had pushed him further than any training session. But more than physical exhaustion, he felt something else. Frustration. He needed help. Again. Despite achieving the Crimson Crown, despite all his training and growth, when a truly overwhelming threat appeared, he'd still needed Kakarot's Ultra Instinct to save the day. The old feelings started creeping back in. The inadequacy, the sense of always being second best, the crushing weight of never being quite enough. But then he remembered the lessons from his visions. Remembered King Vegeta III's words, "A prince doesn't stand alone. A prince leads," which means working with others when necessary. "Don't make a big deal out of it," Vegeta said, his tone gruff but not hostile. "We did what needed to be done." "Yeah," Goku agreed, apparently oblivious to Vegeta's internal struggle. "We make a pretty good team when we work together, don't we?" "We make an adequate team," Vegeta corrected, but there was no real venom in the words. The sound of sirens approached, emergency services responding to the chaos. The 3 defeated members of the Vanguard lay scattered across the plaza, unconscious but alive. They need to be secured, questioned, possibly sent back to Universe 6 through official channels. But that could wait. Vegeta looked down at his hands, at the fading traces of crimson energy that still clung to his skin. The Crimson Crown had served him well in battle, its power and authority allowing him to overcome Grax and contribute meaningfully to the Herald's defeat. But it hadn't been enough alone. And maybe that was okay. He was still learning, still growing. The Crimson Crown wasn't the endpoint of his journey. It was the beginning of a new chapter. There would be more challenges, more threats, more opportunities to push beyond his current limits. And if sometimes that meant working alongside Kakarot, accepting help when it was needed, combining their strengths instead of competing, well, perhaps that was what being a true prince meant in this new age. "Come on," Vegeta said, starting to float toward where Bulma would undoubtedly be coordinating the response efforts. "Let's finish dealing with this mess." Goku followed, and as they flew side by side over West City, Vegeta felt something shift inside him. Not a dramatic revelation, but a quiet acceptance. He'd achieved the Crimson Crown by accepting who he truly was, Prince of all Saiyans, warrior and protector, flawed but always striving to improve. The journey wasn't over. But for the first time in his life, Vegeta felt like he was walking the right path, even if that path sometimes ran parallel to Kakarot's. The medical bay at Capsule Corporation hummed with quiet efficiency as automated systems monitored Vegeta's vital signs. He lay on the diagnostic bed, eyes closed but clearly not sleeping, while Bulma reviewed the data from his battle with the Vanguard on a holographic display. "Your energy reserves dropped to 32%, Bulma said, highlighting the relevant graphs. "That's lower than I've ever seen you go, even during your most intense training sessions." "The Herald required everything I had," Vegeta replied without opening his eyes. "It wasn't a typical opponent, no kidding." Bulma zoomed in on another data stream. The readings from that thing were completely off the charts. "I've never seen energy signatures like that. It was like it existed in defiance of natural law." Vegeta finally opened his eyes, staring at the ceiling. "It was created to consume. A being of negation," the third one called it. "Appropriate name." Bulma glanced at him, noting the flatness in his tone. "You've been quiet since the battle. More than usual, I mean." What's going on in that complicated head of yours? Nothing, Vegeta said automatically, then caught himself. He was trying to be better about this, about actually communicating instead of bottling everything up until it exploded. Everything. I don't know. That's more honest, at least. Bulma saved her data and came to sit on the edge of the medical bed. Talk to me, Vegeta. You achieved something incredible with the Crimson Crown. You defeated that Grax character decisively. You helped save the city. So why do you look like someone who lost? Vegeta was quiet for a long moment. How could he explain the tangled mess of emotions churning inside him? The pride at having accessed his royal heritage, tempered by the frustration of still needing Kakarot's help. The satisfaction of mastering a new transformation, undercut by the knowledge that it hadn't been enough alone. I thought, he said slowly, that achieving the Crimson Crown would change something fundamental. That I'd finally stop feeling like I'm chasing shadows, always one step behind. But today proved that even with this new power, I still needed Kakarot to finish the job. And that bothers you, Bulma said, not a question, but an observation. Yes, Vegeta admitted. No. I don't know anymore. He sat up, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. I've spent weeks learning to let go of that rivalry, accepting that I don't need to surpass him to have value. But when the moment came, when we faced that creature, all those old feelings came rushing back. Bulma reached out and took his hand, her touch grounding. Vegeta, you know that working together doesn't diminish what you accomplished, right? You took down one of those invaders by yourself. You pushed the Crimson Crown to new limits. And then, when faced with something that required combined effort, you made the mature choice to cooperate instead of letting pride get people killed. The mature choice, Vegeta repeated with a bitter laugh. Is that what I've been reduced to? Making mature choices? What's wrong with that? Bulma challenged. You're not the same person you were when you first came to Earth, Vegeta. You've grown. Changed. Become better. Why is that something to be ashamed of? Because. Vegeta stood abruptly, pacing the medical bay with restless energy. Because I was supposed to be the strongest. The prince of all Saiyans, heir to the mightiest warrior race in the universe. My birthright was supposed to guarantee my superiority, and there it is, Bulma said quietly. The real issue. Not that you needed help, but that needing help violates your idea of what a Saiyan prince should be. Vegeta stopped pacing, her words hitting home with uncomfortable accuracy. You've been trying so hard to redefine what being a prince means, Bulma continued, her voice gentle but firm. But you're still clinging to some old definitions. The idea that a prince should be the strongest, should never need assistance, should stand alone against all threats. But Vegeta, that's not what real leadership looks like. Then what does it look like? Vegeta demanded, turning to face her. If not strength, if not independence, then what? It looks like knowing when to fight alone and when to ask for help, Bulma said. It looks like making the hard choices for the greater good instead of your personal glory. It looks like being strong enough to admit you can't do everything by yourself. The words echoed something Vegeta had heard in his visions, King Vegeta III's teachings about responsibility and purpose. But hearing it from Bulma, from his wife who had stood by him through all his struggles and failures, gave the words a different weight. I hate this, Vegeta said quietly. I hate not being certain anymore. I hate questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. I know, Bulma said, standing and crossing to him. But that questioning? That's called growth. And it's a good thing, even when it doesn't feel like it. Before Vegeta could respond, the medical bay door opened. Trunks stood in the doorway, his expression concerned. Father? Are you alright? I felt your energy drop during the battle, and then you've been here for hours. I'm fine, Vegeta said reflexively, then seeing the worry in his son's eyes, added, just recovering. The enemy was formidable. Can I come in? Trunks asked. Vegeta nodded, and Trunks entered, followed, to Vegeta's surprise, by Bra. His daughter looked unusually serious, without her typical bouncing energy. We were worried about you, Daddy, Bra said, coming to stand beside her brother. The news showed the battle. That monster thing looked really scary. Vegeta felt something tighten in his chest. His children had watched him fight, had seen him struggle, had witnessed him needing Goku's help to prevail. It was handled, he said, trying to sound reassuring. The threat has been neutralized. But you got hurt, Bra insisted, pointing at the medical monitors. Mom's machines say you used up almost all your energy. That's what happens in battle sometimes, Vegeta explained, kneeling down to his daughter's level. We push ourselves to our limits to protect what matters. Is that why you train so much? Bra asked. So you can push your limits? Yes, Vegeta confirmed. But you had to team up with Goku at the end, right? Trunks asked, and there was no judgment in his tone, just curiosity. I felt both of your energies combined for that final attack. Vegeta stood, meeting his son's gaze. Here it was, the moment where he could either perpetuate the lie that he'd always told himself, the myth of the lone warrior prince who needed no one, or he could be honest with his children about what he was still learning. Yes, he said finally. The final opponent was too powerful for either of us to defeat alone. Working together was the only option. That's smart, Bra said matter-of-factly. My teacher says teamwork is important. Vegeta blinked. Out of the mouths of children. Your teacher is correct, he said. Teamwork is important. So why do you look so upset about it? Trunks asked, his perceptiveness cutting straight through Vegeta's defenses. You and Goku saved everyone. That's a good thing, isn't it? How did Vegeta explain to his son the complicated tangle of pride and rivalry and identity crisis that made a simple victory feel like a failure? How did he articulate decades of conditioning, of being told he was supposed to be the best, of measuring his worth by his ability to stand alone? It is a good thing, Vegeta said carefully. I'm just still learning to accept certain truths about myself, and what it means to be a warrior. Like what? Bra asked with childlike directness. Vegeta looked at his daughter, at her innocent curiosity, and realized she deserved an honest answer. They both did. I was taught from a very young age that strength was everything, he said slowly. That a true warrior, especially a prince, should never show weakness, never ask for help, never admit there are battles he can't win alone. But that teaching was incomplete. It prepared me to be a conqueror, not a protector. A tyrant, not a leader. He moved to the window, looking out over West City. Being here on Earth, with you and your mother and brother, it's taught me different lessons. Lessons about family, about fighting for something beyond yourself, about the value of connections and teamwork. But old habits, old ways of thinking, they don't disappear just because you want them to. They linger, and sometimes they make you feel like you've failed even when you've succeeded. Trunks came to stand beside his father. But you're working on it, right? Changing those old thought patterns? Every day, Vegeta confirmed. The Crimson Crown helped with that. Achieving it required me to understand that being a prince means more than just being strong, but understanding something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things. You'll get there, Trunks said with quiet confidence. I've watched you grow and change my whole life, father. You never give up, and you never stop trying to improve. That's one of the things I admire most about you. Vegeta turned to look at his son, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. You admire me? Of course, Trunks said, as if it should be obvious. You're my father. You're strong, determined, honorable in your own way. You've made mistakes, sure, but you own them and try to do better. That's what real strength looks like. And you're a really good daddy, Bra added, coming to wrap her arms around Vegeta's leg in a hug. Even when you're grumpy. Bulma watched from near the medical bed, a soft smile on her face. See? Your family doesn't measure your worth by whether you're stronger than Goku or whether you can defeat every threat single-handedly. We just care that you're here, that you're trying, that you love us and protect us. Something broke open inside Vegeta's chest, not painfully, but like a dam releasing pressure that had been building for too long. His children's honest affection, Bulma's steady support, their complete lack of judgment about his perceived failures. He'd been measuring himself by the wrong standards all along. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion he didn't quite know how to express. All of you. For your patience with me. That's what family does, Bulma said, echoing her words from weeks ago. We support each other, even when the journey is difficult. Bra tugged on Vegeta's hand. Are you going to keep training with the red hair transformation? The Crimson Crown, Vegeta corrected gently. Yes, I'll continue to master it. There's still much to learn about its capabilities. Can you show us? Bra asked eagerly. I want to see the pretty red glow. Vegeta glanced at Bulma, who nodded encouragingly. He closed his eyes, centering himself, and called upon the Crimson Crown. The transformation came easily, easier than it had even during the battle. Perhaps because he wasn't fighting right now, wasn't desperate or angry or trying to prove anything. He was simply being himself, showing his power to his family because they asked to see it. The crimson aura wrapped around him, gentle and controlled. His hair gained those distinctive red highlights, his eyes glowed with ruby light, and the authority of his ancestors settled around him like a familiar cloak. Whoa, Bra breathed, her eyes wide. It's so pretty! You look like a king, Daddy. That's because he is one, Trunks said quietly, and there was pride in his voice. The last true king of the Saiyans. Vegeta looked at his reflection in the window, at the crimson power that marked his royal heritage, at his children's odd expressions, at Bulma's fond smile. And for the first time since achieving this transformation, he felt truly at peace with it. Not because it made him stronger than Kakarot. Not because it proved something to anyone else, but because it was authentically his. A power that connected him to his heritage while representing who he'd become rather than who he used to be. I am the prince of all Saiyans, he said, and this time the words carried no desperation, no need for validation. Just simple truth, and I will continue to grow stronger, to protect what matters, to honor my heritage while forging my own path forward. He powered down, the crimson fading, and knelt to be at a level with Bra. Thank you for reminding me what's truly important. You're welcome, Bra said cheerfully, then yawned. Can we have dinner now? I'm hungry. The mundane request after such an emotional moment made Vegeta chuckle. Actually chuckle, a sound his family heard rarely enough that they all looked surprised. Yes, he said, standing. Let's have dinner. The dining room at Capsule Corporation was filled with warmth and the smell of food, a feast Bulma had ordered from Vegeta's favorite restaurant, knowing he'd need to replenish his energy after the battle. The family sat together, and for once, Vegeta didn't eat in his typical rushed, focused manner. Instead, he took his time, actually participating in the conversation rather than just tolerating it. So the Crimson Crown doesn't drain your stamina as much as blue? Trunks asked between bites, his scientific mind, inherited from his mother, curious about the technical details. Significantly less, Vegeta confirmed. Blue requires constant focus to maintain the balance between Super Saiyan power and godly ki. The Crimson Crown feels more natural, as if it's a state I was always meant to access, rather than a transformation I'm forcing my body into. That makes sense from a biological perspective, Bulma added. If it's truly based on genetic memory and royal bloodline, then your body would be predisposed to handle that energy efficiently. It's literally in your DNA. Can I learn it? Trunks asked, not for the first time. I know you said you weren't sure, but now that you've mastered it. Vegeta considered his son carefully. I honestly don't know. The Crimson Crown requires two things, royal blood, which you have through me, and a deep understanding of what it means to be a Saiyan prince. That second requirement is complicated. Because I'm half human? Trunks asked, and there was no resentment in his tone, just acknowledgement. Because you were raised in a different context, Vegeta clarified. I was raised on planet Vegeta, steeped in Saiyan culture, corrupt as it had become. You were raised here, on Earth, with human values and perspectives. Your understanding of pride, of royalty, of what it means to be a prince, it's different from mine. Not wrong, just different. So I might develop my own version? Trunks suggested. Something that combines Saiyan and human heritage? Perhaps, Vegeta said, and found himself genuinely intrigued by the possibility. You and your sister represent something new. A hybrid of two races that could potentially access powers neither pure Saiyans nor pure humans could achieve alone. Your path forward may be entirely unique. That's exciting, Bra said, even though she was probably too young to fully understand the implications. I want special powers too. You'll develop your own strength in time, Vegeta assured her. Both of you will. You carry the legacy of the Saiyan race, but you also have the freedom to define what that legacy means for your generation. Bulma raised her glass of juice. To the next generation of Saiyans, forging their own paths. Vegeta raised his own glass, as did Trunks and Bra. To the future, he agreed. As they ate and talked, Vegeta felt something he rarely experienced: contentment. Not the satisfaction of victory, not the relief of surviving a battle, but genuine peace. His family loved him not because he was the strongest or because he'd achieved some impressive transformation, but simply because he was their father, their husband, their family member. After dinner, as Bulma took Bra to get ready for bed, Trunks lingered in the dining room with Vegeta. "Father," he said hesitantly, "can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask," Vegeta replied, which was as close to permission as he typically gave. "When you fought today, when you had to work with Goku to defeat that final creature, did it bother you? Having to share the victory?" Vegeta was quiet for a long moment, appreciating his son's perceptiveness. "Yes," he admitted. "It bothered me, but not as much as it would have even a few weeks ago, and certainly less than it would have years ago." "Because of the Crimson Crown?" "Because of what you learn achieving it." "Partly," Vegeta agreed. "But also because of moments like this, conversations with you, with your mother, with your sister. You all keep reminding me, in subtle ways, that there are things more important than being the strongest. Things that actually matter more." "Like family," Trunks said. "Like family," Vegeta confirmed. "I spent decades believing my worth was determined by my strength alone. But you don't measure my worth that way, do you?" "No," Trunks said simply. "I measure it by who you are, how you treat the people you care about, whether you keep trying to improve even when it's hard. The power is impressive, sure, but it's not what makes you my father." "When did you become so wise?" Vegeta asked, a hint of pride in his voice. "I learned from watching you," Trunks replied. "You might not realize it, father, but your actions teach us more than your words ever could. The way you never give up, the way you've changed and grown, the way you love us even though you're not always good at showing it. That's what I aspire to." Vegeta felt that uncomfortable warmth in his chest again, the one that appeared whenever his family's love for him became undeniable. "You'll surpass me one day," he said. "You and your sister both. You'll achieve things I never could, because you don't carry the same burdens I do." "Maybe," Trunks acknowledged. "But we carry different burdens. The weight of being your children, of living up to the legacy you're building. That's not always easy either." The observation startled Vegeta. He'd never considered that his children might feel pressure from his reputation, from the standard he was setting. "I don't want you to feel burdened by my legacy," he said carefully. "I want you to be free to forge your own paths, and we will," Trunks assured him. "But your legacy, the good parts, the parts about never surrendering, about protecting what matters, about growing beyond your mistakes, those are gifts, not burdens. We're proud to carry them forward." Vegeta reached out and clasped his son's shoulder, a gesture of affection that once would have been unthinkable for him. "You've grown into a fine young man, Trunks. A better man than I was at your age. A better man than I am now, in some ways." "I don't know about that," Trunks said with a slight smile. "But I appreciate hearing it. You don't compliment easily, so when you do, it means something." "Good," Vegeta said gruffly, uncomfortable with prolonged sentiment. "Now go. I'm sure you have training or studies or whatever young people do with their evenings." Trunks chuckled, recognizing his father's discomfort, and not pushing. "Good night, father." "I'm glad you're okay." "Good night, Trunks." As his son left, Vegeta remained in the dining room, staring at his empty glass and thinking about the conversation. About legacy, about pride, about what he was passing on to the next generation. He'd always thought his legacy would be defined by his strength, by the enemies he'd defeated, by his status as the prince of all Saiyans. But sitting here in this home he'd built with Bulma, raising children who looked up to him not for his power but for his character, perhaps this was a better legacy than he'd ever imagined. Late that night, Vegeta found himself unable to sleep. Not from nightmares or visions this time, but from restless thoughts that wouldn't quiet. He slipped out of bed carefully, so as not to wake Bulma, and made his way to the balcony. The city stretched before him, peaceful and quiet in the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were sleeping safely because he and Goku had stopped the vanguard. Families were intact. Children would wake up tomorrow to normal lives, all because warriors like him stood between Earth and those who would do it harm. That was worth something. That mattered. "Can't sleep?" Bulma's voice came from behind him. She emerged from the bedroom wrapped in a robe, her hair slightly mussed from sleep. I thought you were asleep, Vegeta said. I was, Bulma confirmed, coming to stand beside him at the railing. But I woke up and you weren't there. Figured I'd find you out here brooding. I'm not brooding, Vegeta protested. I'm contemplating, Mim. What's the difference? Brooding is unproductive. Contemplation leads to understanding, Bulma smiled. Okay, so what are you contemplating? Vegeta was quiet for a moment, organizing his thoughts. Everything that happened today. The battle, my children's words, my conversation with Trunks. All of it. And what conclusions have you reached? Bulma asked gently. That I've been an idiot, Vegeta said bluntly. Bulma laughed, a sound that rang out clear in the quiet night. Well, I could have told you that years ago. But what specifically makes you an idiot? I've spent so much time focused on being the strongest, on surpassing Kakarot, on proving my worth through power alone. But none of that is what actually matters to the people I care about. You don't love me because I'm strong. My children don't look up to me because I achieved the Crimson Crown. They care about who I am, how I treat them, whether I'm there when they need me. True, Bulma agreed. Though to be fair, the strength is impressive. I won't lie and say it isn't attractive watching you fight. Despite his somber mood, Vegeta smirked slightly. I'll keep that in mind. But you're right, Bulma continued. The power is secondary. What matters is the person beneath it. And that person has grown so much over the years, even when he doesn't give himself credit for it. I don't know how to stop measuring myself against Kakarot, Vegeta admitted quietly. I understand intellectually that I shouldn't, that it's unhealthy and counterproductive. But it's such an ingrained habit, such a fundamental part of how I've defined myself for so long. Then maybe don't try to stop completely, Bulma suggested. Rivalry isn't inherently bad, Vegeta. It pushes you both to improve, to reach heights either of you might achieve alone. The problem isn't the rivalry itself, it's when you let it define your entire self-worth. How do I do that? Vegeta asked. How do I maintain the rivalry that drives me to improve without letting it consume me? Bulma thought for a moment. Remember that competition can be fun. It doesn't have to be desperate or painful. When you and Goku spar, when you push each other to new limits, that can be something you both enjoy rather than a constant source of anxiety. And more importantly, remember that even if Goku achieves something before you do, or vice versa, it doesn't change your fundamental value as a person. Easier said than done, Vegeta muttered. Of course it is, Bulma agreed. Changing lifelong thought patterns is one of the hardest things anyone can do. But you're already doing it, Vegeta. You're already better than you were. You just need to be patient with yourself. Patience has never been my strength. No, Bulma said with a smile. But perseverance is. And perseverance will get you there eventually. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights. Then Vegeta said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For staying with me. For believing I could change even when I wasn't sure I could. For giving me a family and a reason to want to be better." Bulma leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "You know, when we first met, I never imagined we'd end up here. You were so angry, so focused on revenge and proving yourself. But I saw something in you, a potential for growth that you didn't even see in yourself, and you decided to stick around and see if that potential would manifest?" Vegeta asked. "Something like that," Bulma confirmed. "Though I'll admit, there were times I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake. You weren't exactly the easiest person to live with." "I'm still not," Vegeta pointed out. "True. But you're getting better at it. And besides," Bulma added with a mischievous tone, "life with you is never boring." Despite himself, Vegeta chuckled. "That's one way to put it." "Come back to bed," Bulma said, tugging gently on his arm. "You need rest. Tomorrow you'll probably be back in the gravity chamber pushing yourself to new limits, and I'd prefer if you did that on a full night's sleep." Vegeta allowed himself to be led back inside, back to the warmth and comfort of their shared bedroom. As he settled back into bed, Bulma curled against him, and he found himself wrapping an arm around her, a gesture of affection that still felt slightly foreign but increasingly right. "Bulma?" he said quietly into the darkness. "I love you." The words came out stilted, uncomfortable. He still wasn't good at expressing sentiment. But they were genuine, and that was what mattered. "I know," Bulma replied, her voice warm with affection. I love you too, you complicated, impossible, wonderful man. Vegeta closed his eyes, feeling something settle inside him. The anxieties and doubts hadn't disappeared completely. They probably never would. But they'd quieted, relegated to background noise rather than overwhelming static. He was the prince of all Saiyans. A warrior, a father, a husband, a protector. He had achieved the Crimson Crown, accessed his royal heritage, and discovered a power that was uniquely his own. But more importantly, he was learning to be at peace with who he was. Not perfect, not the strongest, not without flaws or failures. Just himself. And for the first time in his life, that felt like enough. As sleep claimed him, Vegeta's last conscious thought was of gratitude. For his family, for his growth, for the second chance that Earth had given him to become someone worth being. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to test the Crimson Crown's limits, new lessons to learn about himself and his place in the universe. But tonight he could rest. The Prince of all Saiyans had finally begun to understand what true pride meant. Not arrogance, or the desperate need to be superior, but quiet confidence in his own value regardless of external validation. It was a lesson that would serve him well in the trials to come.